of CAT and IT.
The South African Weather Service says the heat wave in some parts of Gauteng, the Northwest, Limpopo and the Free State will continue up until tomorrow. Forecaster Chifiwa Madiba says in the Free State, the heat wave is affecting the northern parts of that province. Madiba says this includes Kroonstad, the eastern parts of Bethlehem, as well as the central parts of Mangaung.
We are expecting Monday and Tuesday hot temperatures with isolated showers and thunder showers over the southern parts and the western parts of Free State. And on Wednesday, we stand a good chance of receiving significant amounts of rainfall, wherein we are expecting the eastern parts and the Lesotho border to receive 60 to 80% showers and thunder showers. And on Thursday, we will still see the 60% showers and thunder showers remaining over the eastern parts of Free State. Otherwise, the rest of the province will receive 30% showers and thunder showers.
And looking at other parts of the continent, the authorities in Tanzania say 47 people have been killed and 85 others injured in landslides caused by flooding. There are warnings that the death toll may rise. The BBC's Camilla Mills reports.
The Tanzanian President, Samia Hassan, who is in Dubai attending the COP28 climate summit, has deployed national security forces to help rescue efforts following the flooding near the slopes of Mount Hanaan in the northern region. A regional commissioner said more than 100 houses had been destroyed and that crops and trees had been washed away. East Africa has been badly hit by floods and landslides, partly caused by the El Niño weather phenomenon. Flooding is said to be the greatest natural hazard in Tanzania, affecting tens of thousands of people each year. The rain is expected to continue throughout December.
And now for the latest on a developing story even further afield. The Israeli military says its ground operation is underway in southern Gaza. It follows a week-long truce. Israeli bombardments are continuing on Khan Yunis and Rafah in the south. Israeli military head Lieutenant General Hervé Halevi explains.
We have the capabilities to do this in the most thorough way. And just as we did it strongly and thoroughly in the northern Gaza Strip, we're also going to do it now in the southern Gaza Strip. And we continue to secure our accomplishments in the northern Gaza Strip.
Meanwhile, some analysts suggest that the presence of Israeli tanks and troops to the east and north of Khan Yunis may force Hamas fighters further south. They say this will have serious consequences for civilians in Gaza, where the situation is described as dire. And in recapping the top story at this hour, the Constitutional Court is today expected to deliver the highly anticipated judgment on the Electoral Amendment Act. I'll have your headlines at 6:30.
A very good morning to you. In your SFM sports headlines, we have the Blitzbokke. They claim their fifth straight title win in Dubai, and TX Galaxy, they beat Amazulu to set up a Carling knockout final, and that's a big match. They'll take on Stellenbosch FC. We'll have the details just before 6:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning, pretty good start this Monday. We are at load shedding stage 3 for the drive to work this morning. Some of the areas out are the busy ones this morning. Parts of Pretoria North on to support Vanderboom out to Montana. Pretoria West also out. That causes problems. And the other side, you've got Erasmus Kloof and Monument Park. So you get Vanderkloof High School traffic affected. And also the R21 running north towards Fountains will be under pressure as well. Joburg, Burnham, Melrose, Bramley and Wynberg across the Dunkeld and Rosebank. The Crown area offline as well. That's also worth noting. That'll get busy. Durban side, there's been a collision on the N2 southbound. It's just by the Clare Road Bridge in the construction, so traffic's already building up the N2 south from Inanda Road as you make your way slowly down, passing that one towards the crash in on your way towards Spaghetti Junction. Cape Town looking good. The N2 inbound from Khayelitsha, the N1 coming in from Belleville. No major problems, but traffic is building. Now, this is important. Stand by. The Monday edition of the award-winning SAFM Sunrise starts now.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
Some people can keep a secret. Rob Byrne is not one of them. Good morning. Welcome to SAFM. Welcome to SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Critters. I'll talk a bit more about all of that later, but thank you, Rob. I do appreciate it, and thanks for your messages over the weekend. Good morning to you. Monday morning. 2 weeks to go. Just 2 weeks to go until the holiday season sort of starts. So anyone who tells you now, we're going to get this done by the end of the year, I would be a little cynical. Maybe that's just me, but I'll be a little cynical. So, Du and Stanza have given me a list of things to do by the end of the year. Promises, promises. Let's see. Anyway, how are you doing? How was your weekend? I would like to think that you got some rest time. I just find, and I know I've said this to you before, but there was no rest at all really this weekend. It was just so busy, so many different things to do. And lots of stuff to sort of sort out, A lot of sort of social stuff as well, family stuff. I must tell you, and this is, in a way, you might find it sort of strange, or a strange thing to talk about, but I thought it was interesting. So twice yesterday, I went to 2 different shopping malls. And one was, I was taking my daughter to something, and the other was a sort of family event. We went to go and see a play. And in both cases, coming out, paying for parking was a disaster. Just a disaster. The one is a big shopping mall in the north of Joburg, and the paying was okay, but the queue to get out was ridiculous. And then the other one, the long queue to pay, was nonsense. And the reason I think about this is that all the time we're told that, shopping centres are under threat from online shopping, right? We talked about that during the sort of Black Friday thing. We've spoken about it before. And you would think that Christmas is the one time that shopping malls have to get their stuff right, to get you back into the shopping mall, to make it a fun experience. And there's parking, just a mess, always been a mess, never been right. And it just made me want to go back online. I hate shopping online, frankly, it's not my thing. But paying for parking, getting out of a shopping mall, I find just bizarre. Have you ever come across that? I've seen situations in shopping malls where people have got out of their cars. Remember one woman once using the kind of language I never thought I would hear, and just shouting at someone because she was so cross. Because, I don't know, I just find shopping malls and parking does my head in. Such a bizarre thing. All right, let's get into the news, shall we, and talk about some of the other important things, more important things perhaps. There's a strange story around the Border Management Authority, and they say they've used the word traffic. They stopped 443 young children coming from Zimbabwe on buses, on 44 buses, and they keep using the word traffic. They'll stop at Beitbridge. And what is interesting to me is that from what I understand, the children all had their passports. They did not have their parents with them. But some people are saying what was actually happening was that, and these are young children under the age of 8, so there's no way they were being looked after properly. There's just no way. There's only the driver on the bus. Can you imagine being the driver on the bus with so many children? Sure. But what they're saying is that actually people had paid for these children to come to the country to be with their parents over Christmas. So on the one side, you've got the word trafficked, which sort of says, terrible things. And on the other side, you've got, no. They were paid, someone paid adults to bring their children. So the grandparents paid, because they're with their grandparents in Zimbabwe, their parents work here, how our society is. And they were coming here for Christmas. So to try and get these two things in my head, I'm not sure which it was or which it is. And also 44 buses. You can hardly hide 44 buses. I mean, you'd see 44 buses with children on. Anyway, we will talk a little bit about that. And if they stop by our Border Management Authority, then were they let through by the Zimbabwean side? There's so many strange questions here, and it gets to the heart of some of the difficulties in our society at the moment. Talking of travelling over Christmas, I see that over the festive season that PRASA has got its long-distance railway lines back up and running. And you can go from Joburg to Durban and Joburg to Cape Town, the Shosholoza Mail. I've always wanted to do one of those long train trips. I did once when I was a kid, a couple of times when I was a student. Would love to do it again. But you can go look at the pricing on this. It's not my job to advertise PRASA. I don't think anyone will ever accuse me of advertising PRASA. But Joburg to Cape Town from 430 Rand, Joburg to Durban for 170. That's pretty good. I mean, look, I don't think you're on your own in a compartment, with a shower, but, still, 170 Rand, Joburg to Cape, Joburg to Durban. That's not a bad price. Anyway, big conversations this morning, of course, around what's happening at COP28. Our President, Cyril Ramaphosa, he's been there. Barbara Creasy, the Minister of Environmental Affairs, she's there. And she was saying that the big thing to manage the just economic transition is financing. I mean, it's sort of obvious, but sort of important to keep mentioning that. That's our big problem, really, is actually money, is managing the money. And I'm sure there'll be more conversations around that in the next little while. Roger Jardine, now, I must just tell you something about Roger Jardine, and then I'll sort of say what's happened, is that Roger Jardine is someone I actually worked for for about 3 years at the company I was working for before I came to this one. So just so you know that all of the future conversations, if we have any, about him entering politics and all the rest, just know I know him personally. I haven't spoken to him, probably, 2, 3 years? 4 years, probably, actually. I would have last seen him, I think, at a funeral a long time ago. But just to say, that all of the conversations we come, just to put up front, that I have worked for him at the company that he was running at the time. And there's a lot of speculation that he will be the sort of person who is the kind of presidential candidate for the multi-party charter for South Africa, so the opposition movement or the Moonshot Pact or whatever you want to call it. And I find it a bit curious because there's really no sort of good history of a new person entering politics and making a huge difference. And other parties have tried it. Bishop Mvume Dandala was the presidential candidate for COPE. Dr. Mampela Rampele was the sort of candidate very briefly for the DA at one point. And so I don't know if it'll work. Let's see. It may not even happen. I don't know. It may not. But I still thought it was just interesting. There's so much speculation around this. And that to me gets to a kind of, I think what people are looking for is they're looking for some kind of reason for hope. This is what will change things. I think that's what people are saying. But it doesn't always work out like that. And even in other countries, it doesn't always work out like that. I know people say Donald Trump, but Donald Trump went through a party. He went through the Republican Party. I suppose you could argue maybe Roger Jardine could do the same thing. I don't know. And then one other thing I want to just mention is Professor Harry Seftel. You may remember him. He was old when he passed away. He passed away over the weekend. He was 95. And he was actually a medical student while Nelson Mandela was a legal student, a law student at Wits University. And they knew each other then. And then sort of famously, Harry Seftel, over the years, became sort of the top doctor in the country, really. He was at Wits University for a long, long time. I think 50 years he worked there and was a professor for a long time. And when Nelson Mandela was about to be released, I think they sort of sent him to go and check that he was okay. The other thing I should say is that I knew him personally. He was someone I would bump into from time to time. Very kindly man, took an interest in people, would, come and talk to sort of younger people, which I sort of appreciated when I was young. I suppose I could learn from that. And then also was someone I know would intervene in cases. Someone would say, I've got a problem, phone the prof. And someone would phone the prof and there'll be a response and he would come and check. So a very kindly man. It was sad to hear that he had passed away at the age of 95. Professor Harry Seftel.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
Well, as Rob said, over the weekend we got confirmation that SAFM Sunrise has been judged the best news and actuality show in the PBS section of the Radio Awards. So from Du and Stanza and Zai and Leander and Anne and Zelma and Paul and all of us and myself, we just wanted to say thank you for your support, for taking part in our conversations and debates and for arguing with us and for sometimes laughing with us. And for actually just being a part of us and our show. For me, coming into work every day to talk to you is just so exciting. And it's always interesting. It is challenging sometimes. It's a lot of fun. But most of all, I think we try to focus on what's important. And while we can talk about all of the important things, really, the important thing in all of this is you.
Individual brilliance always adds a superb vibe to the team. Sami Sohail of Malawi holds the highest batting average in 2020 internationals. Dhruv Maisuriya of Botswana is the quickest to reach 50 wickets in 2020 internationals, and Francisco Kowana of Mozambique is the first player to score a century and take 5 wickets in the same 2020 internationals. Catch these African stars in action of the BNP Group Africa Cup this December, live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The Daily News Diary on SAFM.
It's been a little while, and Paul Satole, good morning. Welcome back.
Good morning. Indeed, it has been, Stephen. Thank you.
How are you doing?
Very well, thanks.
Good. Busy. It's supposed to be December. I don't know about you, but in my house, the children are on holiday mode. But it's still very, very busy.
Yeah, the children are on holiday mode, Stephen, and also hinting at demands and requests for Christmas presents. I mean, my daughter speaking about a 5,000 Rand doll. And I was like,
Your children are polite. Mine have dropped their hinting.
Well, Stephen, it really is a busy day today as we take a look at today's diary, more especially in the midst of all the other leading stories, the focus really on the courts. I mean, looking at a court ruling that could have a drastic impact on next year's national elections. I mean, it's set to be a game changer for South Africa's democracy. The Constitutional Court is today expected to deliver the highly anticipated judgment on the Electoral Amendment Act. Build One South Africa and the Independent Candidates Association approached the court earlier this year. They're arguing that the act was unconstitutional as it restricted the participation of independent candidates in the elections and their representation in the National Assembly. That's compared to political party candidates. So we'll have to monitor this one. I mean, the legal experts weighing in are saying it's only a principle of fairness to really say how independent candidates will be accommodated.
There's so much to it, and it's so important for the Electoral Commission to get finality too, because they need to know how to manage the elections.
Yeah, absolutely. We do continue to monitor court stories throughout the course of the day in several provinces. 15 people, including the former mayor of Mohlahlana municipality and an ANC member of the Limpopo legislature, is going to be appearing in the Special Commercial Crimes Court in Polokwane. The former mayor, Andrina Matsimela, ANC member of the provincial legislature, Tali Mashamaite, and several others, including companies, are facing more than 100 charges of fraud and corruption, all relating to an alleged irregular tender in the municipality. So we keep a very close eye on that one, Stephen, as well as a matter in Limpopo in Zanin. The Napumo Magistrates Court is expected to continue with the sentencing of farm manager Mark Scott Crossley. You'll recall that he is found guilty of attempted murder, malicious damage to property after driving over farm worker Silence Mabunda in Hoedspruit in 2016. So really important one to monitor, as well as another matter in the courts in the Northwest. 13 undocumented migrants today expected to appear in the Klerksdorp Magistrates Court. They were arrested at the disused Wolverand gold mine last week, and the Hawks are saying that a police multidisciplinary task team pounced on this team of illegal miners who fled the scene, leaving their equipment behind, and 13 people found on the periphery of the mine site were apprehended and then charged of contravening the Immigration Act.
So much to look at there, isn't there? Mpositole, thanks very much indeed. We'll be listening on the radio 19 minutes after 6.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
Let's have a look at your weather around the country this morning. Tshwane, partly cloudy, 17 and 34. Johannesburg, partly cloudy, 16 and 33. Vereeniging, partly cloudy, 16 and 33. Bombela, partly cloudy, 16 and 31. Polokwane, fine, 17 and 32. Mahakeng, fine at first, otherwise partly cloudy, 16 and 37. Vryburg, partly cloudy, isolated showers, thunder showers, 16 and 38. Mangung, partly cloudy, isolated showers, thunder showers, 16 and 36. Kimberley, partly cloudy, isolated showers, thunder showers, 17 and 37. Uppington, partly cloudy, 19 and 36. Cape Town, partly cloudy, a light and variable wind, 16 and 22. George, partly cloudy, a light and variable wind, 14 and 22. Gqeberha, partly cloudy, cloudy at times, a light to moderate northwesterly, 15 and 23. East London, partly cloudy, scattered showers and rain, a light and variable wind, 16 and 22. eThekwini, partly cloudy, becoming cloudy, scattered showers, thunder showers, a moderate southerly wind, 21 and 25. Richards Bay, partly cloudy, a moderate to fresh northeasterly, 21 and 29. And Pietermaritzburg, partly cloudy, becoming cloudy, scattered showers and thunder showers, 18 and 29.
Rand Water is concerned about the significant increase of water consumption in its areas of supply. The increase in water consumption is putting severe strain on Rand Water's distribution network. To save water, please do not wash your cars with hose pipes. Use buckets. Water your garden with sprinklers between sunset and sunrise. Do not wash your pavements with hose pipes. Use brooms. Repair your leaking taps. Cover your swimming pools to avoid quick evaporation. Shower instead of bathing in a tub.
This message is sponsored by Rand Water in partnership with City of Joburg, City of Ekurhuleni, and City of Tshwane.
Hello, Michelle. Hope you're well. You know, Mos, I'm not very lucky for online internet shopping things after Uncle Donnie got a second loan on his house to pay for some escort in Portugal's child to go to university. But listen, I'm addicted to this We Buy Cars auctions. Every day you can buy cars. My finger is jikkerig on the smells. I'm going to click anytime now because I want a fancy fast car. But my husband is making me so moeg. I'm sommer listen auction him. I nogal wonder how much I will get.
We Buy Cars, the best place to buy a car by far. Banyana Banyana, African champions and top 16 team in the world, are in action on Monday, the 4th of December 2023 at the Lucas Moripe Stadium at 3 p.m. They are on the road to defend the trophy as they face Burkina Faso for the Women's Africa Cup of Nations 2024 qualifiers. Join us to close the year. Tickets are available at Ticket Pro at 20 Rand for adults and free for children under 12 and scholars in uniform. You can also watch the match live on S3 at 3 p.m.
Worldview Update, bringing you closer to international or global news.
21 after 6, good morning. Now reported that the Israeli Defense Force has moved into most parts of Gaza, is extending its operations from the north to the rest of the enclave after the truce between Israel and Hamas ended over the weekend. It seems that talks between Israel and Hamas in Qatar broke down over Israeli demands that all the women and children taken hostage by Hamas be released. Now Israeli forces are bombarding parts of Gaza again with hundreds of airstrikes on the enclave. Naeem Jina is a senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. Naeem, good morning and thanks for your time.
Good morning, Stephen.
I suppose we need to really start with what led to the end of the truce. Why did the agreement break down?
Well, it was, remember, originally 4 days and then an additional 2 days. But the first thing is that Israel had been vowing from even before it had started that they were waiting for it to end so that they could continue the bombing. So unlike, I think, the parties who were mediating and perhaps the Palestinian side that was hoping that it would extend into a long-term truce, Israel was making it clear that that's not what they were interested in. But specifically, I mean, the Israelis say that there was a rocket sent from Gaza into Israel, but they then started bombing immediately after the time for the ceasefire had ended or the truce on Monday morning.
I suppose if you're in a position where you're sort of trading hostages and prisoners for days of peace, there's no foundation there for any kind of peace at all, is there?
No, not at all, and especially, I mean, if you look at it from the side of the resistance forces in Gaza, the number of captives they have is also is limited, and so at some point you can count that you will run out, and you need to find other ways of bargaining. The specific thing that you mentioned was that Israel was then demanding. They were talking about a further exchange of women, except that according to the Palestinians, Israel included on that list of women some of the female soldiers. And the Palestinian side is clear that that is a different negotiations, that the round that started last week, the 4 days and 2 days, was about civilian women and children, and that soldiers are a different negotiation altogether.
The head of the Israeli Security Service, so the service is called Shin Bet, his name I think is Ronen Bar, he said on Israeli media this weekend that Israel will eliminate Hamas all around the world, even if it takes years. Is that a realistic goal? And the question of what Israel's goal is has been really important to this. Is it really realistic to say they'll eliminate Hamas?
It's not even realistic to say that in terms of Gaza itself. And that's why, the rhetoric from the Israelis has been changing about what they actually want to achieve in Gaza. So it moves from eliminating Hamas to disarming Gaza to ensuring that Hamas doesn't control any part of Gaza. None of the objectives have been met, of course. Now to extend it to say Hamas people all over the world, I mean, for one thing, it's that kind of a threat is criminal and violation. If it takes place, it would be a violation of the sovereignty of other countries where that might be carried out. But it's not a realistic thing. I mean, also for Palestinians who are abroad, who is a Hamas member, who is a Hamas supporter, etc. So it really isn't realistic. But to extend the objective in that kind of way when it seems unlikely that you're going to meet it in the small 360 square kilometer area is unrealistic.
I suppose Israel would say Hamas's charter calls for the eradication of the state of Israel. So they would probably, in a way, say they're just, I mean, I'm not making a comment on this, but they would probably just say that, you know, this is all the same. Both sides want to eliminate the other. I realize it's a lot more complicated than that.
Yes, it is. I mean, for one thing, that 1988 charter of Hamas has been superseded by its 2017 document, where it actually calls for a two-state solution. But secondly, I mean, the notion of genocide against the people of Gaza really can't be compared to talking about the end of a political entity. And those are really the comparisons. What's the statements made by Israeli government officials about what they want to do in Gaza amounts to intent for genocide. To say, however, that you want the end of a state is very different from saying that you want the end of a people.
Naeem Jinnah, thank you very much indeed. The view from him, senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. Really do appreciate the time. 27 minutes after 6.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning.
Good morning.
The Blitzboks, Argentina.
Oh, champions again. They made it 5 at the Emirates Dubai, 7th title in a row. What a resilient display from the team. Now they've done exceptionally well, beating Argentina 12-17. Next week is the second leg of the 7th series. It'll come to Cape Town, and the Blitzboks will be looking to capitalize on home ground advantage to claim a second win of the season. Let's go now to the Blitzbokker, the assistant coach, Philip Sneeman.
And we want to start a new book and write a new book for Springbok Sevens. And I think we got the combinations right with experienced guys and youngsters bringing a lot of energy. But like I said, all the credit must go to the players. They drove the culture this weekend. They had great team spirit and they played fantastically. They played for each other and they played for their Springbok Sevens jersey. They executed everything on the field. So really happy with the way the guys played.
Soccer action saw TS Galaxy beating AmaZulu FC 3-2. That was at the Carling Knockout semi-final encounter. Took place at Moses Mabhida Stadium yesterday. The victory saw the Rockets progress to their second major cup final, where they will face Stellenbosch FC, and that's on the 16th of December. And from the soccer action, we also head to the tennis story, and this time it's the world number 21, Talon Griekspoor, who finished off Borna Coric 6-3, 6-4 to win the inaugural MGM Macau Tennis Masters yesterday. China's Zhang Zhizhen defeated former world number 5 Taylor Fritz for a second time in 2023 as he claimed the third place. Let's listen to the winner, Talon Griekspoor.
It delivers the cross and the header is in, and Tottenham Hotspur are back level. And Dejan Kulusevski has scored for a third successive trip to the Etihad, and he may well have rescued a point right in the 90th minute.
That's Tottenham Hotspur having a 3-3 draw against Manchester City in a game that took place at the Etihad. Let's go to Talon Griekspoor as he won the MGM Macau Tennis Masters yesterday.
Yeah, super nice, super fun times here in Macau, and an amazing stay. Had a lot of fun off the court, but also on the court. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and hopefully can come back next year to defend the title.
We'll bring you more sport on Sunrise. Headlines, top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Good morning, you're with SFM. We'll be talking a bit more about teenage pregnancy. The numbers are very, very scary. That to come. It's stage 3 now, stage 4 later. It's 6:30.
Thanks, Stephen. Good morning. Making headlines, the Constitutional Court is today expected to deliver the highly anticipated judgment on the Electoral Amendment Act. Build One South Africa and the Independent Candidates Association approached the court earlier this year. In other news, the Basic Education Department says it has made arrangements with Eskom not to implement rolling blackouts at schools during the writing of matric exams. Over 700,000 matric learners are expected to finish their finals this week. And further afield across the continent, the authorities in Tanzania say 47 people have been killed and 85 others injured in landslides caused by flooding. There are warnings that the death toll may rise. I'll have these and other stories at the top of the hour.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Just kick it off with some good news on the West Rand area. Hendrik Potgieter open after a relatively long-term closure out in that Little Falls area due to some damage. It has been closed for a long time, but it is open. You don't have to sort of sit in that localised detour with all those trucks thundering through there as well. So good news. Looks like lights might be down on Jim Forshire heading out towards Bayers Nordia. If you're leaving Rampart Ridge, that is already slow. Load shedding in Montana, noticeable delays. Whakamakato leaving Montana towards the highway, already busy, and the very busy Monday morning queues on the Malotto Road, just extending because no traffic lights at the junction with Whakamakato as well. Durban, the crash just holding up a little bit on the M2 South on the run through Mgeta Road towards Spaghetti Junction. The backlog on the N2 North through Spaghetti just starting to build up as well as we get into a new week. And Cape Town's N7 is a bit of a standout, queuing up passing Langa all the way to Viking Way in the Epping area. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Ray Mohlahlana, good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning. Happy Monday. All good, thanks.
The Asian markets, US markets, how are they looking?
Well, both markets are down across the board. The investor focus is still on the outlook for interest rates. In the US, US Central Bank Chair Jerome Powell has indicated that the bank is done raising interest rates. The central bank could soon move to cutting interest rates. So US markets were mostly up on Friday. And before the US market officially opens later today, the futures market is down. Nasdaq, Dow Jones and S&P futures are each down 0.2%. In Asian markets, Japan's Nikkei and Hong Kong's Hang Seng are each down 0.6%, and China's Shanghai Composite is also down 0.1%, and the US dollar to the rand is 18.64.
And then we're getting third quarter GDP figures this week. With all of the load shedding and all the rest, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, this will be the big economic data for this week. Tomorrow, Statistics South Africa will release data showing how the economy performed from July to September. The easing of Eskom blackouts during this period is expected to have boosted the economy's performance. Economists from Standard Bank and Trading Economics expect the economy to have grown by between 0.1% and 0.2%. This is barely any growth. It points to an economy still in the doldrums, facing problems, many problems such as the lack of business confidence, the electricity and logistics crisis.
And then the new car sales declining in November.
Yeah, vehicle sales in November were down 9.8% or almost 10%. There were just over 45,000 vehicles sold in November. Vehicle sales have been low and declining since the COVID lockdown period. Consumers and businesses are facing tough economic times, and they are unable to purchase new vehicles because of affordability problems.
Ray Mohlahlana, thank you so much. Ray, of course, back in an hour's time. More business news through the day here on SAFM.
Africa Update on SAFM Sunrise, a continental overview of current African affairs.
Russ Advocate Sipho Mantula, good morning.
Steve, our refreshing morning and Jumbo Africa as we enter the reconciliation month.
All right, Sipho, thank you. In Guinea-Bissau, the president there talking about the violence between members of the National Guard and Special Forces, he says it was an attempted coup.
Stephen, the President Umaru Sissoco Embalo was in Dubai in the COP28 when this thing happened over the weekend between Thursday and Friday, when there was a confrontation between the National Guard and the Special Forces of the Presidential Guard. This is the second attempt of a coup in Guinea-Bissau, Stephen. Last year, February 2022, there was an attempt for Embalo to be removed, but this time there was a swift arrest of one of the leaders of the command of the National Guard, Colonel Victor Chongo, who was arrested. ECOWAS expressing solidarity, Stephen, with this move by President Embalo to can arrest those who have planned to overthrow his government. This is becoming a trend, Stephen, in the western part of the region of Africa. Whether we know that the Sahel region has been having military coups. So we see it in Guinea-Bissau when the leaders are going to Dubai.
And then in Sudan, the United Nations Security Council terminating the UN transition mission in Sudan. Does this mean, this obviously the situation in Sudan is so difficult at the moment?
Stephen, that will pose a question now. What will happen? We spoke about it on Friday that there was going to be a vote. The vote has been 14 against 1, abstaining being Russia, and the other countries claiming that the issue of the relation between the UN envoy in Sudan, in Khartoum, had already strained since April before the conflict. And now, if one look at the AU has isolated Sudan also, then you ask yourself, what will happen to the political and the peace and the security mission of the people of Sudan? More so, we have this conflict that is almost 8 months since April. Now, we'll see, Stephen, what will happen. Will the AU come to the rescue of Sudan, or will the Arab League or IGAD try to come in? Because this mission was established only 3 years ago just to support a political transition, and it means that there is no transition in Khartoum.
And then in the DRC, the East African Community Regional Forces beginning to withdraw after being accused by Kinshasa of being ineffective.
Stephen, this again also on Friday, we touched on it. If you can recall that it was supposed to be renewed yesterday. But what we saw yesterday, we saw the military leaders of the East Africa community moving out now, its troops now from Uganda, Burundi, South Sudan, leaving the North Kivu in Goma from yesterday. We are talking of 100 peacekeepers that were part of East Africa community. DRC, Tshisekedi saying that they are biased, Stephen, they are not effective. And I think Tshisekedi is relying on the SADC mission that has to be deployed in the DRC. Talking about even DRC, we know that it's few days from now, 16 days, they'll be having their so it is worrying when you are pulling the forces, when you are still having challenges with M23 in the eastern part of the DRC.
And then in our archives, this day, 4th of December, 1996.
Stephen, I think this day it is very important when you talk of the constitution being approved by Parliament in 1996 on this day. It even days back that our constitution, Stephen, I argued with somebody yesterday saying that we tend to forget that this constitution was a process of Kodesa 1, Kodesa 2, but also the 1993 constitution, which marks 30 years that was allowed. I mean, that has paved the way for this final constitution of 1996. But the 1993 constitution also gave birth to this constitution of 1996, and it is important when we look at the challenges of the constitution, Stephen, as we are going for 30 years of our anniversary come next year, 2024, to look at the gains, the losses of our constitutional democracy and values in this country. Asante sana SG, as you are still leading the conversation.
Russ Advocate Sipho Mantula, thank you very much indeed. 21 minutes now to 7. Sorry about the line there. Sipho, of course, back with us tomorrow.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Well, you know the number. That is, of course, the number. Thinking a little bit about this load-shedding judgment, and government in a little bit of a spot now, I think, because on Friday, the High Court in Tshwane handing down a judgment saying that load-shedding was the fault of government, saying that basically failures by government to manage our electricity situation correctly had led to this. Also saying, interestingly, and I thought this might play into some of the debates that we have, some power stations have been run too hard with too little maintenance to stop load shedding. And I think that's a reference to what was happening in the sort of years before 2017. But in a way, what's really difficult is that the judgment says that government must stop load shedding to power stations, schools, and so it's police stations, hospitals, and schools by the end of January. If you look at the situation, it seems to me there's just absolutely no way that government will be able to make sure each police station, for example, has a generator. I mean, it's just not possible to do. So I don't know how this is all going to play out. Your views on that on 086 000 2032. Anyone been on a long-distance train journey recently? And also the idea of someone like Roger Jardine coming in to sort of, run a political party or be a presidential candidate. Do you think that'll work or change our politics?
It's the celebration of the century, and you're invited. We've already given away almost 3 million rand with 56 daily vouchers won. Buy a new Ford before 31 December, and you could win a 50,000 rand voucher or the grand prize of us paying for your new Ford. Visit your nearest Ford dealer today. TNCs apply.
Banyana, African champions and top 16 team in the world are in action on Monday the 4th of December 2023 at the Lucas Moripe Stadium at 3 p.m. They are on the road to defend the trophy as they face Burkina Faso for the Women's Africa Cup of Nations 2024 qualifiers. Join us to close the year. Tickets are available at Ticket Pro at 20 Rand for adults and free for children under 12 and scholars in uniform. You can also watch the match live on S3 at 3 p.m.
Big stories of the day. #SAFM Sunrise.
19 minutes to 7 the time. Good morning. In Parliament, the Multi-Party Women's Caucus hearing that this year alone, 88,122 girls between the ages of 15 and 19 fell pregnant. In other words, it's nearly 90,000 girls under the age of 19 falling pregnant. 2,000 girls between 10 and 14 also falling pregnant this year. I mean, it's a frightening number. And it shows you the scale of the problem. And it seems to me that there have been increasing numbers of teenage girls becoming pregnant since the end of the pandemic. Why is this happening? Brenda Madamisa, she's an advocate. She's the director of the Wiser Collective. Brenda, good morning and thanks for your time.
Good morning, Stephen. Good morning to the listeners.
Why do you think this number is increasing? Well, that's what it seems like. But it seems that we're having more and more teenage pregnancies at the moment.
Stephen, I think I want us to distinguish between the young girls between 10 and 15 and 15 upwards, right? The ages between 10 and 15, that's statutory rape. It's not even teenage pregnancy, that's statutory rape, right? That action should have been taken when that happened to a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old, 13, and depending on who the perpetrator was. If the perpetrator was an adult, then that's statutory rape. So we need to isolate those and act on that, because what it tells me is that no one is aware of that, or if we are aware of it, we're ignoring it, right? That's the first one. The second one is the 16 upwards, right? So what is happening in this country, and if you take this and then you take the HIV/AIDS survey that was done by the HSRC, you'll see the correlation, because there is actual sexual activity that is taking place and is increasing, right? Because in many instances, we have pushed back as a country on sexual education. That's the first thing. We do push back on that. We think that the schools are not the place where sexual education should take place. It does not happen at home because we see sex education, or even talking about sex, as taboo, right? And that's why you have high incidences of sexual violence. You then also have a situation where in most areas you don't have activities where children are kept occupied, right? And they would then tend to think that sexual activity is the only outlet that they can satisfy themselves and without knowing the implications and the consequences of those actions, right? So it's a combination of things that are actually leading to the increase of the numbers of girls that we see falling pregnant. And we had agreed on an intervention with government, which was a year ago, on what needs to happen. If I tell you, and I'm quite surprised that the Multi-Party Women's Caucus has come out as if, and it tells me that they have not been briefed on the developments that are unfolding on what needs to happen.
Is this being driven by elder men, the sugar daddy phenomenon, transactional sex?
On the young girls that we interviewed and asked, trying to assist, yes, it's older men. It's if there's a construction going on in a particular area, and there are men working on that site, this happens to young girls, right? Because, I mean, if I give an example of the girls that we saw in Northwest, for instance, most of the men that engaged in these activities were men from outside the province who are older and who were working on the construction site. So that would seem to be pervasive across, because it's not a 10-year-old engaging in sex with a 10-year-old boy engaging with a 10-year-old girl. No, it's actually older boys, and it's all about giving something to alluring these young girls with cell phones, with money, and all of that. So it's and these young girls they find themselves in those situations where they're lured into these sexual activities.
It seems almost impossible for our society to stop this. I mean, teachers get away with it. When people know who it is, and we've spoken to the Council for Educators as to how they get away with it. And the problem is also policing, and the problem is all of these things. And one of the problems is the girl sometimes won't say who the father was because she's scared, or the family will say, don't say who the father is because he's giving us money, all of these things. I mean, this requires a really large-scale social intervention of some kind.
Absolutely, and that's what we wanted to do. When we met with Department of Women, it was about that we bringing all the key stakeholders and role players in this area, because it can't be done by one NGO, it can't be done by one government department. You need a multi-sectoral approach to arresting this situation, and we really it was goodwill from our part as NGOs to say to government, let's join forces to find solutions and stem out this practice, right? So we met last year. We mapped out exactly what needs to be done. We're waiting for Department of Women. Department of Women has taken over 6 months to come back to us. And we still don't know whether in the new year we will kick this intervention or not. But there was a recognition on the part of NGOs working in this area that we need every single department, every single NGO working in this area to come together and arrest the situation.
Thank you very much indeed, Advocate Brenda Madumisa, Director of the Wiser Collective. You're with SFM. Sammy's on the line from Dobsonville in Soweto. Sammy, hi. Teenage pregnancy. Good morning.
Hello. Good morning, Stephen. I hope you well. And for me, I'd like to know about the statistics, right? How many of these girls get impregnated by older men, and how many of them get impregnated by their peers? Yeah. And you might ask, why does it matter? It matters because it affects the way government allocates the resources. As you've seen what's been happening ever since 1996. I've thanked Constance Zuma has come back from the Beijing conference where she made a statement saying we must focus on developing women and girls and forget about men and boys because they're criminals. Because what happens right now is that more than 80% of government resources get directed towards women and girls. And men and boys get marginalized. It's a fact, they're not making this up. And these are men and boys like myself who never had anything to do with the policies that had oppressed women. We never had anything to do with sleeping with children. We never had anything to do with abusing women. But at the end of the day, we get affected. So I'm interested in the statistics. Rather than just making blanket statements. We need cool heads when it comes to this issue.
All right. No, Sammy, I think you're right. We do need cool heads. I think there is evidence. I think there is quite a lot of research, actually, that shows that it is, to a large extent, elder men. And one of the things Brenda Madumisa said was, if you have a building site or construction or something, so those will be easily men over the age of 18. You suddenly have an increase in teenage pregnancies, if I understood her correctly. And we've seen this as well with teachers. You see it all the time. So, no, Sammy, I think there are numbers. I think there is evidence to look at that. There's also, I've noticed that this year, a lot more focus on changing the attitude of men, and that's really in a way where I think we do need to start. 10 minutes to 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Northern parts of Tshwane, there's been quite a big crashing, quite a nasty one on the N4. This is the Bakwena-Rustenburg Highway. It's just past the Lavender Road Bridge, just after the Bonaccord and Anlin exit. Motorists driving towards Brits or towards the Rustenburg direction, N4 West, really stuck in a heavy queue that is just continuing to build. Maloto Road and Sivaka Makato, very busy Monday morning traffic, plus some load shedding in that area. Breakdown on Pretoria's N1 South around Linwood, so coming through from the N4 Mohlahlana Highway, that's busy. Joburg's N1 South to Winnie Mandela, there's an early queue, that's a bit unusual. And the bottom of Joburg, there's a vehicle on fire, N3 North at Elan's interchange, so that traffic backlogging through towards Grey Avenue if you're arriving up from Sprayview and Foster sides this morning. Some queuing pressure and quite heavy queues as well. Durban, an earlier crash on the N2 in the construction between Umgeni and Spaghetti Junction, so traffic coming through from Inanda Road is quite heavy. There's a lot of traffic going north as well on the N2 from the M7 through to the roadworks just north of 4 level, and then another queue between Komashu and Gateway into those roadworks as well. Cape Town, if you're stuck going into the CBD thinking it's a bit early, it is, but the problem is a grass fire in the central median there just after the Woodstock exit. So the N1 pushing back with a right lane closure, that's in pushing traffic back towards Kubo interchange, and of course behind that Marine Drive is quite heavy coming through Parton Island to try and get in to that N1 traffic queue. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The Queens of African football, Banyana want to defend their WAFCON title. However, they must negotiate maximum points with their visitors, Burkina Faso. This is the second leg of the Women Africa Cup of Nations WAFCON qualifiers. West African outfit say their long trip to Southern Africa is to grab all the 3 points. All roads lead to Morocco WAFCON 2024. South Africa tackles Burkina Faso on Monday, 4 December at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and S3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Agenda-setting conversations of the day.
8 minutes to 7. Well, so much going on in the electricity space at the moment. On Friday, the High Court in Tshwane ruling government is responsible for load shedding. That load shedding is a result of government failures, and government must provide electricity for all police stations, hospitals and schools by the end of January next year. In other words, exempt them from load shedding. At the same time, the Energy Minister, Gwede Mantashe, is saying over the weekend he would issue 3 more energy procurement rounds before the end of the year, which probably means literally in the next 2 weeks. In the middle of all of this, the consultancy PwC is saying they believe South Africa needs some gas to power electricity, or will need some gas to power electricity in the future. You know, of course, all of the arguments about the kind of energy or the kind of energy mix that we will need. Martin Solomon wrote that report for PwC. He's an energy expert at that consultancy. Martin, good morning.
Good morning.
You say that we will need some gas to electricity generation. I suppose, what kind of energy mix do you think we need to look at?
Well, to answer the question, one has to understand the limitations that renewable energy faces. I mean, firstly, it is an intermittent energy source. And for an industrialized economy like South Africa, we need certainly very, very sustainable and definitive power. So when you're dealing with intermittency, if you don't have sufficient hydro, then solar and wind certainly cannot do the load following that you need. So it is inevitable that one is going to need renewable energy supported by gas to power to make an economy like South Africa work.
So, I mean, there are different ways you can do this. You can use hydro, as you say. I agree with you. I don't think we have the capacity. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I agree with you there anyway. The only other way to do it is through battery storage, which is also quite expensive. So, how much gas generation capacity do you think we would need in sort of terms of megawatts?
Well, the issue around energy planning is if one looks at South Africa's current reality, we have a material gap in generation of about 6 to 8 gigawatts, depending on how you analyze this. But I think the more critical question or approach to answering your question is to also think about the nature of the need to grow this economy from its current base to something much bigger. So we assumed at PwC that a 4% per annum GDP growth is what you would need. If you apply that approach, then we are talking about tens of gigawatts into the future, both in terms of renewables and gas. And our reality, of course, that compounds that even more is that we're facing a period in the next 20 to 30 years when Eskom coal decommissioning has to happen. So, if you hear Eskom, they talk about 50 to 60 gigawatts of new power, and roughly half of that, I would argue, would have to come from gas. So it's material. It's significant.
Half of the grid would have to come from gas.
Yeah, look, I'm using very crude numbers because I'm not looking at detailed analysis, but you would need something of that order. Firstly, to displace coal, which is base load. Secondly, then to provide the load following support in order to push as much green energy into the system as we can get.
Okay, I mean, look, gas is obviously the greenest of the fossil fuels, but it's still a fossil fuel. But I mean, it's still, I appreciate what you say, but it's still a huge amount to say that half the load would have to come from gas. At the same time, the argument sort of from the renewable lobby would be renewable energy is moving very quickly. It's coming on stream. The price is dropping. And they would probably argue that we would have to build big gas infrastructure almost from nothing. And we might end up not using it. It might become a sort of stranded asset.
Well, I couldn't disagree more fundamentally with that assertion than it's been made. Look, the unfortunate reality is that the debate around energy has become very polarized. So if one applies just a fact-based and science-based approach to this, I mean, my first observation is gas infrastructure for South Africa would in large part mean regasification terminals. Now, regasification terminals are hardly the most expensive component of the gas system. They're not cheap, but they're not the most expensive. The other good news for us is that we have seen significant new discoveries in the upstream around oil and gas. I mean, most notably and more recently is the discoveries in Namibia. So there is the prospect of relatively more competitive gas coming into the economy from Namibia. But, the notion that the cost of renewable energy will forever be in decline is also highly challengeable. And the reason for that is that energy systems are, per definition, systems that are based on the extractive industry. The truth is that renewable energy costs have significantly reduced over the last period, but the system faces material supply chain constraints. And when you're dealing with supply chain constraints, we will see periods of higher cost in renewables. So in reality, one really has to look at the balance of factors in order to plan energy systems properly.
There are other options. I mean, some people would say we should use nuclear. We know that takes at least 10 years, and frankly, if we're being honest, probably longer. How long would it take to build the gas infrastructure? I mean, obviously you wouldn't do half a grid in one go, but to have a significant contribution from gas, how long would that take?
Look, I'm giving you sort of an order of magnitude when I say half the grid. I mean, it's probably half the new capacity, but let's not get stuck on that. If you're asking the question about timing, I mean, to develop an offshore oil field, if it is, comes with gas at some point in production, that's about 4 to 5 years, depending on how quickly the oil economics can be made to work. So, don't be surprised if you see an accelerated development in Namibia. Now, the nice thing about Namibia is Namibia now has these two major discoveries offshore, one by Shell, one by Total, and there are others also exploring. But they lie next to the old Kudu field, and Kudu itself has a couple of TCF of gas that could be pulled into the market within a relatively short period. So I'd say with an aggressive approach, you could see gas landed onshore in Namibia in the next 4 to 5 years.
Martin Solomon, thank you very much indeed. Energy expert at PwC.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
John on the line from Davidson. John, hi. You're a former school principal. The issue of teenage pregnancy.
Yes, I will mention 3 things, John. The first is, if you go to Davidson and do an assessment, you'll find almost all the schools don't have recreation facilities. So kids don't have a place to play. That is something that has to be addressed by the government. You cannot keep on blaming apartheid. They have to do something. Because even the new development, the squatter camps, don't have recreation. So kids are not used to be playing. They sit and discuss about sex. You go to the media, SABC, all the soapies that are watched by black people or African people, it's either a gun, it's sex. They always say if there's something that is not acceptable, we must report to the board. Nobody does that. I'm telling you, that's why they learn all these things, violence. You look at the high rate of HIV. It relates to it's either HIV or pregnant. Then you have got this is as a result of foreigners when they come here, they don't normally come with their wife first. They come alone, it's men only.
Right. Yeah.
That contributes. Now we have got children in the township which are from then their fathers are from Somalia because they don't have money. They go and loan food on account.
All right. John, I'm sorry, we have heard you. I was surprised we got to sort of foreign nationals there, but I appreciate your other points, important points as well. We are running a little bit late. You're with SFM leading the conversation at 7 o'clock. Outsurance will go out of their way to try and save you money on your car insurance. If they can't, ask for 500 Rand. SMS out to 38462. Now that's good news.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
The top stories at this hour: Concourt to deliver judgment that could affect next year's elections, and dozens of people killed in Tanzania floods. Good morning. For SAFM News, I'm Mphosa Thole. Now, some legal experts say today's Constitutional Court ruling on the Electoral Amendment Act could have a drastic impact on next year's national elections. The highly anticipated judgment follows the decision of Build One South Africa and the Independent Candidates Association to approach the courts earlier this year. They argued that the act was unconstitutional as it restricted the participation of independent candidates in the elections and their representation in the National Assembly compared to political party candidates. Legal practitioner Mpumelelo Zigalala explains.
It's only the principle of fairness to say how we're going to accommodate the independent candidates, how we're going to make sure that you are taking the views of the people and the will of the people into account when allocating the seats to political parties and to independents. Once that public consultative processes has been done and the window of opening up any objection has been closed, then the voters' roll will be closed again, and then we can go and vote for those individuals that have been approved.
Now, legal expert advocate Mudidi Manya says the EFF MPs should have participated in a hearing instead of heading to court. The parties challenging the proceedings of the hearing into the conduct of 6 EFF MPs who stormed the stage during President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address in February. The EFF will also challenge the proposed penalties that will be imposed on its MPs. They include suspension from Parliament without pay for the entire month of February next year. The EFF's case is expected to be heard in the Western Cape High Court today. Manya says the party could have chosen a different route.
This again drags the judiciary into the disputes within Parliament, exposing the judiciary to the ongoing attacks, which some of them come from members of Parliament. In my view, the EFF ought to have participated in the process from start to finish and ensure that it raises whatever concerns it has so that it is easier for all of us to determine the rationality of the decisions of the committee.
The Basic Education Department says it has made arrangements with Eskom not to implement rolling blackouts at schools during the writing of matric exams. Over 700,000 learners are expected to finish their final exams this week. The department's Chief Director of Examinations, Dr. Rufus Polia, explains.
What we need to indicate that there was no load shedding during the writing of CAT and IT. What we had was in KZN at one center where there was a technical problem that was limited to that one center. But the electricity was restored and the learners were able to write. So there was no load shedding. And therefore I said thanks to Eskom for having kept the lights on during the writing of CAT and IT.
In other parts of the continent, the authorities in Tanzania say 47 people have been killed and 85 others injured in landslides caused by flooding. There are warnings that the death toll could rise. The BBC's Camilla Mills reports.
The Tanzanian President, Samia Hassan, who is in Dubai attending the COP28 climate summit, has deployed national security forces to help rescue efforts following the flooding near the slopes of Mount Hanan in the northern region. A regional commissioner said more than 100 houses had been destroyed and that crops and trees had been washed away. East Africa has been badly hit by floods and landslides, partly caused by the El Niño weather phenomenon. region. Flooding is said to be the greatest natural hazard in Tanzania, affecting tens of thousands of people each year. The rain is expected to continue throughout December.
Even further afield, the Israeli military says its ground operation is underway in southern Gaza. It follows a week-long truce. Israeli bombardments are continuing on Khan Yunis and Rafah in the south. Israeli military head Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi.
We have the capabilities to do this in the most thorough way. And just as we did it strongly and thoroughly in the northern Gaza Strip, we're also going to do it now in the southern Gaza Strip. And we continue to secure our accomplishments in the northern Gaza Strip.
And in recapping the top story at this hour, some legal experts say today's Constitutional Court ruling on the Electoral Amendment Act could have a drastic impact on next year's national elections. I'll have your headlines at 7:30.
And Paul, thank you. Those were the top stories for this hour. Don't miss out on a possible car insurance saving. SMS out to 38462 for a quote. Outsurance, where you always get something out. Is balancing your income statement harder than finding a spot on a popular Durban beach over December? Outsurance is so confident that they can beat your car insurance premium that you can ask them for 500 Rand if they can't. That's a monthly saving on your current premium, or 500 Rand cash, claim free, and with the same insurer for 3 years. Ask for 1,500 Rand. SMS out to 38462 for a quote. That's out to 38462. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's apply.
Very good morning to you. In your SFM Sports Headlines, we look at the rugby action that took place over the weekend, where the Sharks are calling for unity after their Bulls defeat at Loftus Versfeld. And we have action as Liverpool, they leave it late to seal victory against Fulham. All these stories and more just before 7:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Quite a heavy backlog on Joburg Gen 3 coming in from Sprayview and Phosphorus this morning. A couple of lanes on the left are closed due to a vehicle fire incident going into Ilanzi to change that traffic backlogging through towards Grey Avenue. Also, crash coming into Benoni. It's between Snake Road and Tom Jones. So motorists arriving from the Putfontein side, backlogging into that one. And this earlier collision on the N4 at Bonaccord has been cleared. So that traffic backlog that was just starting to backlog direction Brits and Rustenburg, it is on the move. Broken down vehicle on Pretoria's N1 south at Linwood. That's pushing traffic back towards the Storenful Road area. Durban, an earlier crash on the N2 south after Umgeni Road. Traffic starting to move through there. That's the good news. The bad news, if you're on the M7, there's a really big backlog this morning from Hans Detman moving up towards St John's Avenue Bridge in central Pinetown. And Cape Town, the N1 inbound under some real pressure after an earlier felt fire incident, grass fire incident in the middle of the central reservation just after Woodstock. The N1's heavy from Belleville, Marine Drive, heavy through Pardon Island, trying to get into that N1 queue. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
8 after 8, good morning. 8 after 7, good morning. You with SAFM Sunrise. That's a good start to the hour, Stephen. Well done. Glad you're with us this morning. Glad that there's a lot going on, as you know, even though some of the schools slowly sort of heading towards the end of the year. Some of the exams already done. Some of the sort of vibe kind of beginning to change as we head further and further into December, and just a couple of weeks away, really, from the end of the year finally. I don't know if you're feeling sort of energized by it all. I know some people are feeling a bit more about sort of burnout, just a feeling that actually, you know, I'm sort of tired, I'm dreading next year, things like that. And some people have said to me in the entertainment business that it's very busy at the moment. People are almost, you know, just feeling that they just can't, you know, go on working as they have been. Well, we'll talk about burnout from 8:30. We thought that would be a useful mediator conversation just to understand, you know, what it is, how it works, how you feel, and why. So we'll be talking about that from 8:30 this morning. Other conversations, of course, coming up. We'll talk electricity. Huge things going on in electricity at the moment. You've already heard one of our conversations this morning, but more on that. We'll talk also about the situation regarding Transnet and the big loan. It's not a bailout, it's a loan guarantee that government basically announced, the National Treasury announced on Friday. I think that's going to be quite important in the next little while. You're with SFM 9 after 7.
The queens of African football, Banyana Banyana, want to defend their WAFCON title. However, they they must negotiate maximum points with their visitors, Burkina Faso. This is the second leg of the Women Africa Cup of Nations WAFCON qualifiers. West African outfit say their long trip to Southern Africa is to grab all the 3 points. All roads lead to Morocco WAFCON 2024. South Africa tackles Burkina Faso on Monday, 4 December at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and S3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. # We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Big stories of the day. # SAFM Sunrise.
10 after 7, good morning. Government now saying it will give Transnet a 47 billion rand loan guarantee facility as part of its big turnaround plan. At the moment, as you know, tens of thousands of containers still stuck on ships off the coast. They can't dock because of Transnet's problems. We're also losing out because we can't load ships with goods we're exporting. I understand international shipping countries are now charging international companies are charging companies more to come to South Africa. At the same time, on the roads, the situation outside Richards Bay around the Umhlatuze municipality is still chaotic. So many coal trucks trying to offload their cargoes, also because Transnet's railway systems aren't working properly. Professor Jan Havenga is the director of the GAIN Group and professor in the Department of Logistics at the University of Stellenbosch. Professor Havenga, good morning. Thanks for your time this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for the invite.
How important is this loan facility for Transnet? I presume it helps Transnet to borrow money. It still needs to spend that money properly.
100% correct. They do need to spend it properly, but I think this is a good thing. It's a good thing for various reasons, not only for the obvious reasons, but it means that they can get debt at a cheaper interest rate, which is the right thing. It also means a sovereign guarantee, as you correctly stated. This is not money that the state is giving out. And I think a sovereign guarantee for a state-owned enterprise is actually not a bad thing. It's not a surprise. It's the way it should be. Except up to now, the previous management of Transnet did not want sovereign guarantees because they didn't want Treasury breathing down their necks. The current management is much better. They're much more open. They're much more transparent. I can say that the current the chief executive of Transnet at the moment, Michelle Phillips, is really doing a good job. And it's not only me saying that. I can see from the inside out the first time the company. I can see the clients, the customers of Transnet saying she's trying her best. And I think they're beginning to fix things. So this is helpful. It would have been nice to get a capital injection. I think it would have made it easier for them. But I think then, especially in terms of the railway, we first need to get the policy in place. We need to get open access. And I think then it's more fair. So I'm positive.
Okay. I mean, I'm glad to hear that. It's 47 billion rand, this loan guarantee. Do you think Transnet's going to need all of that? I mean, is Transnet going to need 47 billion rand? It's a huge amount of money. You could build half a power station with that, Professor.
Well, number one, it is not necessarily that this 47 billion is going to go to direct infrastructure improvement. Transnet has got quite a few, what I would call bullets. I think in the financial world, they're talking about bullets, which is large repayments that is due soon. They will get that refinanced, but usually at a very high interest rate. What this is going to mean is that some of that debt can now be paid off with this guarantee. And that also means then that the interest rate payment, at the moment they're paying more than R1 billion a month interest. Now, if you can bring that down, let's say you can bring, for instance, as an example, you can bring the billion down to 500 million per month. That's 500 million extra to spend and less debt. So 47 billion, think about it, they've got debt of 135 billion. Currently on the books. So 47 in a certain sense in the world is actually not that much, but it will help a lot. It will really help a lot.
Sure. Okay, so they've got the money. We need a plan and policy, and often there are delays in policy. But how long do you think it would take before we start to see any improvement? I mean, we can't live with containers being stuck off the coast forever. I know when we spoke to Transnet, I think they suggested, it would really be sort of earliest, I think a year, maybe more than that. You'll know the timelines better than I do. How long do you think it will be before we start to see a change?
I can tell you that independently from Transnet, I've got an observatory where I watch their figures very, very closely and do a weekly forecast. And I think they've turned the corner 2 weeks ago. I think it's already getting better. but it's a massive amount of damage that the previous management has caused. I see that for the first time now with the new openness, the new transparency of the new management. The damage is actually extremely deep. There's been a huge amount of skills lost, and the great skills that remain back in Transnet was really not allowed to do their job to the fullest and to the best. So we see the damage now. It's going to take time, but it's already turned around. It's going to take a while. I think they're talking about by February, the backlog would have been eradicated. As far as I know, the Cape Town backlog has already been taken out of the way. It's going to get better, but I saw in the business day this morning, they're talking about a speedy turnaround. It's not going to be that fast. It's going to take a while. We'll have to give this management a little bit of space to fix it.
Professor Jan Havengaard, thank you so much. Director of the GAIN Group and Professor in the Department of Logistics at Stellenbosch University. It's 7:15. You're with SAFM. Gavin Kelly is the CEO of the Road Freight Association, of course, managing trucks. Gavin, good morning to you. You also, despite the fact that they're really a competitor, you want Transnet to be fixed. Do you think this is a good move, this loan guarantee?
Good morning, Stephen. Good morning to your listeners. I think the answer to that is absolutely. We cannot continue going along the route that we've been going for the last couple of months in terms of the delays and the queues and the absolute collapse of our imports and exports. And then obviously over a number of years, there's been this decay. So yes, Transnet needs to be fixed and it needs to do what it should be doing.
The fact that we have so many trucks on the road, I mean, are we breaking records here? Have we ever had queues this long outside Umhlatuze, Richards Bay? Have we ever had the kind of situation in the trucking industry that we've had now? People moving so much coal to different places?
No, we've never had such queues. And it's not just coal, there's manganese and iron ore and chrome that is moving around. And remember that Richards Bay, when built in the early 70s, was built to take all that coal via rail. So no one in their wildest dreams had thought that we were going to put it onto truck and have these 25-kilometer queues standing around everywhere.
We had someone who actually works there phone in, or saying that he works there phoning in from Umlazi, I recall, and talking about how just impossible it was to actually do this. So then we've got all of these things happening around Transnet. Are there going to be then quite quick consequences for for your industry? If Transnet gets fixed in a year, is your industry going to change quite dramatically?
Well, let's say, I hope it gets fixed in a year. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to be solved just by pumping in a bit of money, because that wasn't the issue to start off with. I think there have been some attitudinal and management challenges. Hopefully, those are now going to be sorted. So, yeah, if Transnet is fixed in a year or two, there will be changes for the trucking industry in terms of especially the bulk ores. Yes, there will be changes.
Gavin Kelly, thank you at the Road Freight Association. Do appreciate the time. 7:17.
SAFM 104 to 107. Nationwide.
Well, quite an intriguing court ruling on Friday. The High Court in Tshwane, 3 judges saying government must make sure all public hospitals, schools and police stations have uninterrupted electricity supplies by the end of January. Several opposition parties brought the case. The judges saying load shedding was the fault of government through its failure to invest in power stations early enough and through the policy by Eskom of running power stations too hard with too little maintenance in the years up to 2017. At the same time, the COP28 climate summit underway at the moment, seeing more calls for countries to stop using fossil fuels. But the person running the summit, Sultan Al-Jaber, who also runs the Oil SOE in the United Arab Emirates, says phasing out coal, oil and gas, and this is his phrase, would take the world back into caves. Professor Samson Mampwedi is the head of the Energy Secretariat at the South African National Energy Development Institute. Professor Mampwedi, good morning and thanks for your time.
Good morning, Stephen, and the listeners.
I presume, let's start with the court ruling first. No matter what the court ruling says, there's no way Eskom or government could stop load shedding by January, and no way government can get backup power to all of the schools, hospitals and police stations in the country.
Yeah, that's correct. So the court judgment is basically in line with what the president wanted to do when he appointed the Minister of Electricity. That was the top of his agenda, was to basically exempt those establishments from load shedding. But, looking at the timeline and looking at the fact that they've been trying to do so for quite a long time and they were they were unsuccessful. I don't think they will be able to do that by the 31st of January. It's not going to be possible.
So, I mean, government will now have to appeal the order and just say it can't be done, or be seen to be in contempt of court. It's quite a difficult technical position for them.
Yeah, that's the issue. It's either they need to appeal or they need to write to the court and ask for an extension of time, which can be done, because this is not like a criminal matter, but a civil matter where they can approach the court and say, we understand what you're saying, but it's not possible for us to be able to do it within this particular timeline. Can you give us an extension of time? And in my view, they need to extend to maybe mid next year, around June, July there, while they are still working on various interventions. The biggest problem, Stephen, is that is the technical side of things, to say, how do you exempt these establishments and ensure that the people around them are not exempted, because they are connected to the lines that are giving power to the people around them and the businesses around them. And if you don't implement this properly, you end up exempting the people and the businesses around these establishments, which becomes unfair to the rest of the society in South Africa.
You can just imagine house prices around a hospital, for example. The arguments around fossil fuels at COP28, and they have a direct bearing, and Professor, you and I have spoken about this many times. We're in the middle of a sort of huge energy transition. We have big debates around what the mix should be. What's happening at COP28 has a huge bearing on what happens to us. And we have Sultan al-Jaber claiming giving up oil and gas would see us, I'm not going to repeat his quote, but would see us going backwards, would stop global development. Do you agree with him?
I don't fully agree with that particular statement, and I think it's quite a bit unfortunate. I think what he was supposed to have looked at is the pace at which we do it, and the issue around bringing in some abatement technologies, such as your carbon capture and storage technologies, your carbon capture and utilization technologies. We have now the green hydrogen side of things that we can also use to replace some of the fossil fuels in the transport sector as well. We know about the work that the Japanese have done, for instance, the work that we are doing here in South Africa, Sasol being involved even on aviation fuels, cleaner aviation fuels and things like that. So for me, it's more about the pace of the transition, to say let's not mess up in terms of the security of energy supply, but we need to move from fossil fuels to cleaner fuels, and also cleaner fossil fuels technologies.
One of the interesting things about this, now Environmental Affairs Minister Barbara Creecy, also at COP, saying over the weekend that really the problem with the just energy transition is financing. And for us, that's a big issue. Do you expect us to get any more financing from out of this summit?
Yeah, I think the financing part is also a bit of a tricky one, because what we see now is the delays in the setting up of the loss and damage fund, which is basically the fund that can assist especially the developing countries in terms of accessing fund after the loss and damage, and also the climate finance itself. It's coming largely as loans. And as opposed to, maybe 50-50 loans and grants. Those loans are quite good, because they've got low interest rates. But however, the conditions that come with the finance also are a bit tricky, because in most cases they come and say it's only for 100% renewables. In South Africa, for instance, we've got a big problem with our grid capacity. So we can use some of that money to strengthen the grid where we want to connect renewable energy. You recall, Stephen, that there's more than 3,000 megawatts that could not be announced by Minister Mantashe because of the grid challenges. So those are some of the nitty-gritties that we need to work around.
The Energy Minister, Gwede Mantashe, is quoted in Business Day this morning saying he wants to issue 3 more electricity procurement rounds before the end of the year. And I realise the end of the year is 4 weeks away, but it's really 2 weeks away in terms of the working year. Is it possible to issue 3 more procurement rounds? I mean, that would be moving very quickly.
Yeah, I expect that we will have procurement of between 15,000 and 17,000 megawatts before the end of the year.
That's a huge amount of electricity. Do we know what the energy mix on that would be?
Most of it will be, we expect that most of it will be wind, followed by solar, and then there will be some battery energy storage facilities. There will be about 2,500 megawatts of nuclear as well.
We had a conversation earlier with PwC. They issued a report late last week. Their experts suggested that, in fact, we would need gas-fired electricity, gas-generated electricity, perhaps even sort of half of all the new generation capacity. Quite a big amount, quite a significant amount. I realize this is very contentious, but do you expect us to need a lot of gas in the future? It's not renewable, which means you can always use, it's always on, but it also means that it's still a fossil fuel.
Yes, I just forgot to mention that in the next procurement, we also expect some gas capacity to be procured as well. The issue with gas is that it's one stage below other fossil fuels such as coal in terms of emissions, so it can be used as a transition kind of a fuel. There are studies that have indicated that we will run out of gas in the country if we're looking at the current gas supply systems by 2050. So that's we need to look at that from that point of view of saying, where will we get gas? Are we bringing these gas power stations between now and 2050, and then while we ramp up the renewables part of things? Those are some of the questions that we're starting to look at from the scientific point of view as well. But we expect some gas to form part of the energy mix in the 15 to 17,000 megawatts that the minister will be announcing quite soon.
Professor Samson Mampwedi, thank you. Head of the Energy Secretariat at the South African National Energy Development Institute. Really appreciate the time. 27 after 7.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. What happened to Amazulu yesterday?
I think they saw some stars. TS Galaxy beating them 3-2. Carling knockout semi-final. That took place at Moses Mabhida Stadium. Victory seeing the Rockets progress to their second major cup final. They'll face Stellenbosch FC on the 16th of December. Galaxy's next game is against Orlando Pirates in a DStv match on the 9th of December. Usutu, on the other hand, bow out of the League Cup, and they now focus on their league matches, with the KwaZulu-Natal Giants scheduled to lock horns with the champions Mamelodi Sundowns on the 6th of December. Action elsewhere saw 10-player Chelsea battling to a win. They had a 3-2 victory over Brighton, lifting them back into the top half of the Premier League table. Tottenham had a 3-3 draw against Manchester City. What a game at the Etihad, with the City boss Pep Guardiola happy with the points.
They are happy, come back for the point. We are less happy, and continue. So insist. When a team is playing in the level, you have to just insist. When the situation is not good, we have to do something. Of course, the fact that we don't concede much and all the time goal. We don't concede much and goal. So we are a team like we're solid, but in chances being created for the opponent, the average is so low. So it's really, really good.
Now, Liverpool, they scored twice in 2 minutes to seal a 4-3 comeback win at home to Fulham in the Premier League as well. Here's Liverpool boss Jurgen Klopp.
Today we scored 4 worldies, and we're lucky in the end to win the game. So that tells you pretty much everything. It was up and down, but 4 goals I've never seen before in one game, to be honest, like this. Good.
Rugby action in the URC. The Bulls had a 44-10 victory over the Sharks. The Lions taking down the Dragons 49-24. And the Stormers beating Zebra 31-7. While the Blitzboks, they withstood a second-half onslaught from Argentina to claim a historic fifth consecutive Dubai Sevens tournament victory. The win sees the Blitzboks tie with Fiji for the most consecutive cup titles in one location and New Zealand for the most titles in one location. It was South Africa's first tournament win since last season's Dubai Sevens. And finally, golf. Dean Burmester won back-to-back European Tour tournaments with a 3-shot victory yesterday in the South African Open after almost pulling out in the second round due to a tummy bug. The 34-year-old South African, winner of the Joburg Open last weekend, carded a 4-under final round 68 for his fourth European circuit win. Here's Dean Burmester.
And back-to-back. I've never done that before, so it's special. It's obviously one as a South African that you've always wanted to win, second oldest. There's only one more that's older than that I just happened to get into last week, so who knows what happens next. But at this stage, to be involved in this tournament and to win it with a bank that used to sponsor me and got me off the ground when I was just a kid is super special. So to be the SA Open champion is something I'll never forget.
We'll bring you more sport on Sunrise with the headlines, top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Good morning. You were the SFM leading the conversation. We'll talk a bit more about the strange case of children being brought into South Africa from Zimbabwe in the next half hour. It's stage 3 now, stage 4 later. It's 7:30.
Thanks, Stephen. Good morning. For SFM News, I'm Mposa Tole. In your headlines, the SACP has accused the Impala Platinum Mine of failing to put in place measures that could have prevented a recent incident at its operations in Rustenburg in the northwest, where 12 miners died in that incident. In other news, some legal experts say today's Constitutional Court ruling on the Electoral Amendment Act could have a drastic impact on next year's national elections. The highly anticipated judgment follows the decision of Build One South Africa and the Independent Candidates Association to approach the courts earlier this year. And legal expert Advocate Budima Manya says the EFF MPs should have participated in hearing instead of heading to the courts. The parties challenging the proceedings of the hearing into the conduct of 6 EFF MPs who stormed the stage during President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address in February. I'll have these and other stories at the top of the hour.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Just a reminder of this big truck crash with extraction underway. It's on the N3. It is Joburg bound between the Hoek Plaza and the sort of Weybridge area just before you get into sort of Heidelberg central area. So it's a really big queue. It looks like everything's being stacked up at this stage. Trucks and vehicles queuing heavily just after the Hoek Plaza. You'll run into that. Crash coming into Benoni from Daveyton and Putfontein. That's heavy as well. That collision before Tom Jones. Traffic back towards the Kingsway exit. And there's a breakdown on Joburg's N3 running south at Marlborough Drive. So if you've turned off Buccleuch interchange and hit a wall of traffic, that's what it is. A heads up, Pretoria's N1 looking fairly slow this morning from Linwood Road territory down to the lane restrictions at the R21. Durban, 2 queues to work through on the busy N2 on the way to flight connection. So make sure you don't get caught running late here. There's a big backlog on the N2 north from the M7 through the roadworks at M13 Bridge. And then you pick up another queue between Queen Nandi Drive and a breakdown in the other roadworks up towards the Gateway exit. Cape Town, the Veld fire that was burning, or grass fire on the N1 at Woodstock, that is being cleared, but it's left a really big backlog of traffic in from Belleville. The N1 very busy now to Kubo interchange. It also queued up traffic on Marine Drive as you come through Pardon Island to get onto the N1. That was all being held up by that earlier incident. So although the incident's cleared, Marine Drive stays heavy. And it's probably just worth a note looking at the M5 coming up from the south. It's busy this morning. Going to pick up traffic around about Ottery, and it goes all the way up through Kenilworth, Rondebosch and Maitland towards Kubo interchange. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Ray Machlaka, good morning again. Asian markets, US markets, how are they looking?
Well, both markets are down across the board. The investor focus is still on the outlook for interest rates in the US. US Central Bank Chair Jerome Powell has indicated that the bank is done raising interest rates and the bank could soon move to cutting interest rates. So US markets were mostly up on Friday, and before the US market officially opens later today, the futures market market is down. Nasdaq, Dow Jones, and S&P futures are each down 0.1%. Asian markets are also down across the board. Japan's Nikkei and Hong Kong's Hang Seng are each down 0.6%, and China's Shanghai Composite is also down 0.1%, and the US dollar to the rand is 18.65.
And then Transnet, we've been talking a little bit about that, but the Treasury has given the loan, the 47 billion rand loan guarantee, but there's some big changes.
Yeah, the National Treasury has given Transnet a support package worth 47 billion rand. It is not a bailout or a cash injection for Transnet. However, the Treasury has given a guarantee to the state-owned Transport Group. Transnet can use this guarantee to borrow more money from lenders, and if Transnet defaults on debt repayments, then the government or taxpayers will have to step in and pay the debt. The National Treasury has imposed conditions to its support package. Transnet's management and board have to demonstrate progress on implementing reforms in the company's logistics operations. Transnet must implement the National Logistics Roadmap, which involves Transnet embracing private sector players more in its rail and port operations.
And then producers warning that egg shortages may be with us for another 18 months.
Yeah, Quantum Foods is one of South Africa's largest egg producers. Quantum Foods expects the bird flu outbreak to still have a long-term impact on the availability of eggs. The outbreak has forced poultry farmers to cull many chickens, which has resulted in the shortage of eggs. And Quantum Foods expects intermittent egg shortages for at least another 18 months. The price of eggs might continue to be high as well.
Ray Mohlahlana, thanks very much indeed. Do appreciate it. Ray, of course, back tomorrow. More business news through the day here on SAFM.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Well, good to hear from you this morning. Lots going on, of course, talking about electricity, talking about load shedding, that ruling on Friday, talking as well around COP28 at the moment. The idea of one person coming in and sort of being the presidential candidate for the multi-party coalition. Talk of Roger Jardine doing that. Other questions coming through as well this morning. And the other big issue, of course, is around teenage pregnancies. Jeffrey in Joburg on that. Hi, good morning.
Hi, Stephen. Yeah, Stephen, to my side, I think it's because of the starvation why these girls are doing this thing. And I don't think we just have to blame the older man. The thing is, I was at the Kraaifontein shopping mall, that shop right there. So I find 7 girls. These girls were going around. What they asked for money to donate, and then at night the gangsters are buying them. I mean, they all, not just cash, they're also asking for food. So at night, these gangsters call these girls together. That is in Kraaifontein, So they feed all of them. And if they can eat that food, they beaten them. So I find another 2 again, is the same story again. These girls were asking me for 2 rand. So then I decided, no, let me buy them cold drink because they see I drink cold drink. From there, these kids told me, no, man, listen, we can't drink the cold drink. We have to close it again because you have opened it. We have to take it to them so that all of us must eat the flat. You see. Now, that is why I say, what are they going to do? Some of the other guys, they will take advantage, young guys and as well as old guys, because these kids are hungry.
Yeah.
There's nothing at their houses.
Yeah. No, Jeffrey, I mean, I think a big, the phrase that people use is transactional sex. It's money or food or whatever it is in exchange for sex. And I think that's really the big issue, Jeffrey. I mean, I think it's such a big part of it. Voice notes coming through this morning on 0614 104 107.
Congratulations, SG and SAFM and all the listeners of SAFM. Congratulations, guys. We love you, and let's keep it safe on the roads.
We all know that was Freddie, right? Freddie, the truck driver. Freddie, thanks very much indeed. Really appreciate it. Other voice notes coming through this morning.
Morning, Steve and SA listeners. I don't think that the government will be able to achieve that. Remember, The electricity minister promised the country that by December they would have done away with load shedding. But where are we now? We are still deep in load shedding. Even the one they are talking about of SAPS and the schools hospital, I don't see them achieving it. Bulelani Lituka, Ematatiele.
Mohlahlana, thank you. Drive safely in Matatiel there. Yeah, I mean, I just don't see, court ruling doesn't change the physics of it in any way. But I think it does maybe change the debates and conversations that we have around load shedding. 21 minutes now to 8. You know the number 086 000 2032.
Individual brilliance always adds a superb vibe to the team. Sami Sohail of Malawi holds the highest batting average in 2020 internationals. Dhruv Maisuriya of Botswana is the quickest to reach 50 wickets in 2020 internationals, and Francisco Kouana of Mozambique is the first player to score a century and take 5 wickets in the same 2020 internationals. Catch these African stars in action of the BNP Group Africa Cup this December, live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Big stories of the day. #SAFM Sunrise.
Well, I don't know what plans you have for the festive season, whether you plan to be going out a bit more, enjoying yourself, socializing a lot more. I think there's a lot more socializing going on, and frankly, I think we deserve it after the period that we've had in the last couple of years. Our concerns, of course, around the alcohol that goes with that, and so often, we sometimes forget that I think only around a third of people in South Africa actually drink alcohol at all, and yet look at the impact that it has on our society. It has a big impact on people who don't drink because of what drunk people do. Well, let's sort of have a conversation around ways to manage this and ways to manage your own behavior during this time. Cathy Mohlahlana is the CEO of aware.org. It's the Association for Alcohol Responsibility in Education. Carmen, good morning.
Hi, Stephen. It's actually Mokebe Tulo, and I'm the head of brand at aware.org. Good morning to you and good morning to your listeners.
My mistake, Mokebe. I do apologize. Just before we go any further, aware.org is actually run by the alcohol industry, right?
No, it is not. Aware.org is, in fact, funded by the alcohol industry. That is true. But completely independently run. We are an NPO focused on harm reduction.
Okay, but the money comes from the alcohol industry. So then what advice do you have for people during the festive season? A lot of people want to go up and want to enjoy themselves. I think we all want to do that. How careful should we be?
I mean, very careful as one can be. It has been a tough year, Stephen. You're right. It's been a tough couple of years, and I think that is the case for most people, most South African citizens particularly. And I think everyone deserves to, be able to have a good time, to let their hair down, to relax a bit. But that doesn't have to involve irresponsible consumption of alcohol. So, we advocate for fun, but we advocate for responsibility more than anything else.
Do you think there's been a shift in how we look at it, and particularly around driving? 20, 30 years ago, it was common. You saw it all the time, people driving home drunk. And I think it still happens, don't get me wrong. But I wonder if we've started to see the same culture shift that we've seen in places like Britain and Australia around drinking and driving. I'm hoping that we see people, if they're driving, drinking a lot less or not drinking at all.
Yeah, I mean, we see a very positive shift in that area, Stephen, and we're very glad to report that. I think people are recognizing some of the real dangers of taking the risk and driving under the influence. I think people are recognizing that there are alternatives to drinking and driving, such as assigning a designated driver, for example, such as not consuming alcohol that evening themselves, such as having alcohol alternatives, as in very many zero alcohol drinks out there that have been made available, such as e-hailing solutions. There's so many alternatives that people can take advantage of that we should actually not be having to have this conversation.
It's interesting, the sort of zero alcohol beers and things like that. They seem to be coming quite popular. And certainly you see more and more of them being sold. And I think more and more, the idea of well, you're out, you're with us, you're in a pub, you're in a tavern, you have to have a drink. I think that has changed, hasn't it? That idea that you have to have a drink. Now it's becoming more and more sort of normal to see someone with a 0 beer, you might not even notice, etc. That kind of thing. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have seen an increase in the consumption of zero alcohol drinks. But again, Stephen, what is normal? What makes up pop culture? Our behavior is what makes normal. So it is whatever we do that leads people to the behavior that they resort to. And this includes, I guess, some of the ways in which alcohol is proliferated within the media, the way alcohol is talked about within households, within communities, within schools, etc.
I mean, I don't know, there's been talks about banning alcohol advertising for so long, it still hasn't happened. Do you think advertising plays a role?
I would definitely think alcohol advertising plays a role, and that is why there is a code of conduct when it comes to advertising around alcohol, with very particular and strict rules around what cannot be done across the different media channels. So yes, it does, and it is one of the things that needs to be taken a look at.
It's interesting to watch a society like ours. I mean, during the lockdown, we had long conversations around alcohol because the sale of it was banned. And then, of course, it sort of changed. And then those debates seemed to go away again. I don't know if we learned anything from that time. I thought maybe we would have learned something, and I thought more regulation would come in. And that doesn't seem to have happened. And we're sort of 2 years out of it now.
So, Stephen, just to clarify, at aware.org, we deal with alcohol responsibility and education. We are not on the policy side of things, and that is where the Drinks Federation of South Africa comes in. So we cannot be both the post office as well as the regulator of the post office, so to speak. So we leave the policy in the hands of the very capable DFSA. I think this is a very long-standing debate, and I think people on both sides of the debate feel very strongly about it. But what we say is that any decision that is made has to be research-based and has to be deeply considered before it is made.
Thank you very much indeed. Mokebe Tulo, apologies for the wrong name earlier. Mokebe Tulo is the head of brand at aware.org. 13 minutes now to 8.
At SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
Good to hear from you this morning. You know the number 086 000 2032. I don't know if you've been sort of socializing more or planning on it, or actually less, just because, you know, it can be quite expensive. I don't know how you see that at the moment. Voice notes coming through as well this morning.
Good morning, Steve Ovo. It's Chris and Peter Maritzburg. Today's Constitutional Court decision, I'm waiting for it for a number of reasons. The first reason is that we hope that it's going to put a stop to this political party elitism, where political parties believe that they can predetermine the outcome of the 2024 elections, subordinating the will of the people and subverting democracy as the will of the people, by the people and for the people. That's one. But secondly, it needs to reignite the belief in democracy for the people, and hope that many South Africans are going to vote.
I like the way you put that, reignite the belief in democracy. I think it is, in a way, quite an important thing to do. Jacob in KwaZulu-Natal, hi, good morning. And teenage pregnancies.
Hi, Stephen, how are you?
I'm well, go for it.
Good. Stephen, my worry is it was when the gentleman of David Tony was calling you.
Yes.
Regarding this teenage
yes.
pregnancy issue. Yeah, I was saying this guy is telling the truth, Stephen.
Mm.
Yeah, because my feeling it was when he dismissed him when he was speaking regarding the foreigners.
Well, we ran out of time. All I said was that I was surprised I was surprised to hear that. But the other stuff I knew.
Yeah, when you're saying if he's raising the issue of foreigners, of which is the guy is telling the truth, Stephen. I mean, we cannot be accepting so many people here in South Africa. The quality of our life, the quality of jobs, I mean, it's getting wasted. And then it's true, these people, they come here without women. And then when they get here, obviously, they're going to have to have medals in South Africa. And then they're the ones that are owning everything in South Africa. Car shops, work, and everything. Of course, these kids, they're going to have to give themselves to these guys in order to live.
Okay, Jacob in KwaZulu-Natal, thank you. It's 11 minutes to 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Still a big backlog coming into Joburg from the Free State this morning on the N3. So there's been a multi-vehicle truck crash. It's between the Hoek Plaza and the Weybridge area, just south of Heidelberg. And that's a very heavy backlog of vehicular and truck traffic being caught up there. Stays heavy coming in from Daveyton towards Joburg with an earlier crash scene in Benoni. That's been replaced by a breakdown before Atlas. So traffic parking back through Pitfontein and working back in towards the Daveyton area. Broken down vehicle on Joburg's N3 south at Marlborough Drive. There is a queue of traffic into that. And there's a crash at the bottom of the N1 mid-Rand, just going down towards Buccleuch. So traffic parking back through towards Allendale. Heavy traffic on the N4 going into Pretoria, the Witbank Highway, Emelafeni Highway from Watermeyer through towards the N1. The rest of Pretoria looking fairly doable this morning. Two big queues on Durban's N2. One is from the M7 Bluff exit through to the roadworks just north of Spaghetti Junction. And then you pick up a secondary queue from sort of Queen Nandi Drive territory up through Kumashu and all the way to Gateway. That is a broken down vehicle in that construction before you get to the M41. Cape Town coming out of Tableview, busy again this morning, complicating matters. No traffic lights. Plattercliff Road at Kuberg Road. So Kuberg Road out of Tableview, backlogging to Kalani Gardens and looking very slow. And big traffic on the N7 this morning, north through Langa, through Epping, and then it gets really heavy from Goodwood all the way through to Bosmansdam Road. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Gautrain is for the legends who make moves to save and pay from as little as 40 Rand from Sandton to Rhodesfield. It's for the bozzers who switch off the geyser when no one's home. And for our clever who get that there's food at home means exactly that. So when it comes to travel, make moves that save and pay from as little as 40 Rand from Sandton to Rhodesfield Station. Gautrain, for people on the move.
Banyana, African champions and top 16 team in the world are in action on Monday the 4th of December 2023 at the Lucas Moripe Stadium at 3 p.m. They are on the road to defend the trophy as they face Burkina Faso for the Women's Africa Cup of Nations 2024 qualifiers. Join us to close the year. Tickets are available at Ticket Pro at 20 Rand for adults and free for children under 12 and scholars in uniform. You can also watch the match live on S3 at 3 p.m.
SAFM 104 to 107. Nationwide.
9 minutes to 8 the time. Good morning. You know the number, of course. Well, reports over the weekend and statements from the Border Management Authority that they found that they stopped 443 children who were trying to come to the country on 42 buses from Zimbabwe. This happened at the Beitbridge border post. The Border Management Authority says that these children were being trafficked. Deputy Assistant Commissioner Stephen Van Niel is the acting component head for operations and law enforcement at the Border Management Authority. Deputy Assistant Commissioner, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to your listeners, and thanks for having us.
What happened with these children?
Well, Stephen, I think the statement that we released indicated that we deployed our officials at certain points in our ports of entry. And one of these points normally would be, as you just arrive from Zimbabwe, even before you're entering the South African side, that you are deploying officials there to see whether they are complying with our requirements before entering South Africa. So we don't have any jurisdiction as yet at that point in time. But what we then did with the same situation is to deploy officials and obviously refuse those who are not complying to our requirements. One of these non-compliance with obviously the children coming into South Africa from Zimbabwe's side, and we refused them entry and went them back to the country neighboring. And that is what we're not only doing with Zimbabwe, and in this case, but with other countries and other travelers as well.
What was illegal? Why were they not compliant?
Well, obviously, the first thing would be to say that a person present themselves to the port for processing into a country with obviously a passport, would be a passport. Now, in that case, all these children obviously had documents to enter into the country. But there is one particular requirement that says that children under the age of 18 years old cannot travel with an adult. Whether South African children going out of the country, and you'll recall in 2014 when they were at the situation where unaccompanied minor issue was a big issue. in this case, these children were not having, anybody to accompanying them, except that they got into the bus and traveling or intending to come to South Africa.
Okay, so it's children on their own with just the bus driver, and there were 43 buses, right?
Well, perhaps, we are dealing with, on a 24-hour cycle at Beitbridge, between 60 and 75 buses in a 24-hour cycle. And in this case, now that Zimbabwe schools had closed last week, we are not surprised that you would find that number of buses in a cycle of, say, 24 hours. So 43 buses, yes.
Okay. Were all of these buses running together? Was it a convoy of some kind, or was it just 43 buses over the period?
Our operations commenced in the morning and had gone into the entire evening, early hours of the next morning. So it would not be a convoy of 43 buses, but it would be buses that comes in throughout the entire day. One bus, say, for instance, in the next hour or so on. So it is the entire shift that had to deal with that number of buses, not a convoy, Stephen.
Okay. Was this a sting operation?
Well, we do work on intelligence that we receive, but we also know that this time of the year, as schools are closing, and Stephen, I must say, it's perhaps one would be fair to say that it's a practice that we have seen over the years. Zimbabweans who are based in South Africa and the children are back home, when the schools are closing, now these kids are normally entering into this time of the year and then stay here for the festive season, or even sometimes travel back with their parents, by the time when it's closer to Christmas.
Okay, so some of the reporting that I've seen, Deputy Assistant Commissioner, has used two words. The one is a sting operation, and the other that this is children that were being trafficked. Now, these are children coming to spend time with their parents, right?
Yeah, well, we cannot confirm that. There's still the suspicion, and then investigations would obviously reveal that. So I cannot say that these are indeed children. I just made the point to say that this is what we have seen over the years. So I cannot confirm that.
Okay, so it would be too soon to use the word trafficked then?
Well, yes, you're right. For me, when a person moves into a jurisdiction unaccompanied or does not necessarily have the requirements as they would need to enter into a country, it would be a fair point that you're making.
So they're not trafficked. They're just children probably put on the bus by their grandparents to come to South Africa to see their children. And there was no sting operation either. You just know schools broke up in Zimbabwe. This is what happens next.
I think on the latter part, it would be unfair to say it's not a sting operation. This operation was planned before, and it was only limited or knowledge or known to a few people. So in that case, it's not just a random operation. It was a planned operation. And for that reason that we found this number of people.
Okay. And the Zimbabwean authorities were happy to let them leave. They came through the Zimbabwean border.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, if they have been processed, or let me rather say, if they arrive on our side of the border, they've gone through processes on the neighboring country. So those processes would have been completed on their side, but we have not processed anybody to enter into the country.
Okay, so apart from the fact that their guardians weren't with them, and I agree, I think particularly these are children as young as 8, younger than that in most cases. I think the oldest were 8. I mean, I would not necessarily want my children to travel across borders in this way. On the other hand, many people have no choice, and this is how life is, and they want to see their children over the Christmas period. But apart from the fact their guardians weren't with them, no law was being broken. It was just that one thing, that their guardians weren't with them. Is that right?
No, but that's the law, Stephen. You can't say that the law has not been broken. That's exactly the law. You cannot travel into South Africa without a person accompanying you.
No.
That's an adult.
I'm not arguing with you. I'm just trying to understand. That was the only point of... I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying it was the only point of non-compliance.
Yeah, and that is the law that requires that you come into the country with an adult.
I accept that. Okay. But it would be wrong still to use the word trafficked in any way at this point.
Well, I'm saying to you, Stephen, that we are still very much in getting into more details with our counterparts in Zimbabwe, trying to find out what is the realities in this case.
Okay, but the children have gone back to Zimbabwe now.
We refuse them entry and hand them back to the authorities on the Zimbabwe side.
Deputy Assistant Commissioner, thank you. Deputy Assistant Commissioner Stephen van Niel is the Acting Component Head for Operations and Law Enforcement at the Border Management Authority. It's 2 minutes now to 8 o'clock.
at SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
Well, good to hear from you this morning. You know the number, of course, 086 000 2032. I find it a very interesting story. I mean, the Border Management Authority must enforce the law. The law says that you must come with your guardian, so you can't argue with that. What I find curious, though, is the sort of reporting around it. It's all used phrases like trafficking or sting operations. So I don't know if you have a view on that. You may well be one of the parents of the children, you know. I'm sure that around the country, around Southern Africa, we'll see a movement of children in quite a big way at this time of year. All right, coming up in the next little while, and just sort of continuing in a way the sort of Christmas movement theme, I suppose we could call it, the festive season theme. We'll talk about global aviation. In fact, we'll speak to someone from Qatar Airways just about global aviation at the moment and whether or not the industry has recovered. We'll talk about a discovery of hydrogen in Mpumalanga. If you want to know what hydrogen looks like when it's mixed with helium, I would suggest you look up and look at the sun, and then you'll see what happens when hydrogen and helium get going. And we'll also then, don't forget, from 8:30 talk about burnout. You were there, SFM, leading the conversation. It's 8 o'clock. The Outsurance will... Shall I do that again, Zelma? Shall I? You were there, SFM, leading the conversation. It's 8 o'clock. Outsurance will go out of their way to try and save you money on your car insurance. If they can't, ask for 500 Rand. SMS out to 38462. Now that's good news.
Independent and impartial. This is SFM News.
The top stories at this hour. SACP blames Impala for minor deaths, and SA singer Tyler makes it onto BBC's top 10 sound list. Good morning. For SFM News, I'm Mpho Tole. The SACP has accused the Impala Platinum Mine of failing to put in place measures that could have prevented the deaths of 12 miners at its operations in Rustenburg in the northwest. SACP General Secretary Solly Mabaila has called for harsher consequences for mining companies that put profits before human life.
The SACP urges trade unions at Sibanye Stillwater to unite against the impending retrenchments of 575 workers, which the exorbitantly paid frontmen calls cost-cutting measure. We therefore must hold capitalist mine bosses accountable for worker casualties and injuries as well. It is with heavy hearts and profound sorrow that we extend our deepest condolences to the families and comrades of the mine workers who lost their lives in the tragic incident at the Impala Platinum Mine. 12 workers have since died and 75 workers now bear the physical and emotional scars of a disaster that could have been prevented.
Now, some legal experts say today's Constitutional Court ruling on the Electoral Amendment Act could have a drastic impact on next year's national elections. The highly anticipated judgment follows the decision of Build One South Africa and the Independent Candidates Association to approach the court earlier this year. They argued that the act was unconstitutional as it restricted the participation of independent candidates in the elections and their representation in the National Assembly compared to political party candidates. Legal practitioner Mpumelelo Zigalala explains.
It's only the principle of fairness to say how we're going to accommodate the independent candidates, how we're going to make sure that you are taking the views of the people and the will of the people into account when allocating the seats to political parties and to independents. Once that public consultative processes has been done and the window of opening up any objection has been closed, then the voters' roll will be closed again, and then we can go and vote for those individuals that have been approved.
In a different matter, legal expert advocate Mudidima Manya says the EFF MPs should have participated in a hearing instead of heading to the courts. The parties challenging the proceedings of the hearing into the conduct of 6 EFF MPs who stormed the stage during President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address in February. The EFF will also challenge the proposed penalties that will be imposed on its MPs. They include suspension from Parliament without pay for the entire month of February next year. The EFF's case is expected to be heard in the Western Cape High Court today. Manya says the party could have chosen a different route.
This again drags the judiciary into the disputes within Parliament, exposing the judiciary to the ongoing attacks, which some of them come from members of Parliament. In my view, the EFF ought to have participated in the process from start to finish and ensure that it raises whatever concerns it has so that it is easier for all of us to determine the rationality of the decisions of the committee.
South Africa has become the first African country that Saudi Arabia has added to its e-visa system. Tourism Minister Patricia de Lille says this simplifies the process for South Africans seeking e-visas for travel to Saudi Arabia. She's also welcomed the return of the Saudi Arabian Airlines direct flights between Jeddah and Johannesburg. De Lille says the resumption of the flights will boost tourism between the two countries. And South African singer Tyler has made it into the top 10 nominees of the BBC's Sound of 2024 list. Now, the list, which tips music's most exciting new stars, suggests dance and Afrobeats will dominate the next 12 months. Now, in its 22nd year, the list has predicted success for Adele, Stormzy, Fred Again, and Pink Panthers. The winner and top 5 will be announced early next year. And in recapping the top story at this hour, the SACP has accused the Impala Platinum mine of failing to put in place measures that could have prevented the deaths of 12 miners at its operations in Rustenburg in the northwest. I'll have your headlines at 8:30.
Thank you, and Paul. Those are the top stories for this hour. Don't miss out on a possible car insurance saving. SMS out to 38462 for a quote. OutSurance, where you always get something out. Is balancing your income statement harder than perfecting a traditional South African potjie? OutSurance has the secret sauce to managing your finances. They're so confident that they can beat your current car insurance premium that you can ask them for 500 Rand if they're more expensive. That's a monthly saving on your current premium or 500 Rand cash. Claim free and with the same insurer for 3 years. Ask for 1,500 Rand instead. SMS out to 38462 for a quote. That's out to 38462. OutSurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's apply.
A very good morning to you in your SFM Sports Headlines. It's rugby as more Springboks are coming home to South African rugby. And we also have golf action with South Africa's Ashley Buhai winning the Australia crown. Let's find out more just before 8:30.
SAFM. Guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Still very heavy on the N3 approaching Heidelberg. There's been a big 3-truck multi-pile-up this morning between the Hook and the Weybridge area. So trucks and vehicles stacked in a very heavy queue coming Joburg bound. We're still queuing out of Benoni as well, arriving from Daveyton. There's a breakdown between Tom Jones and Atlas, and that's caused a big backlog through towards Pitfontein, just off the highway. Benoni wrapping up some load shedding. So the North Rand Road, Atlas Road junction, very heavy. That breakdown on Joburg's N3 south at Marlborough Drive is still there. Traffic's heavy coming off the Buccleuch interchange. 2Q still with us on Durban's N2. If you're on your way to the airport coming in from the south coast, make sure you've got plenty of time to get through. Big backlogs M7 to M13 bridge into the roadworks, and your secondary queue from Queen Nandi Drive up towards the breakdown just before you get to Gateway. Cape Town side, Marine Drive stays busy out of Tableview, queuing up from Sunningdale through to the first lights at Sunset Beach. And if you're exiting on the refinery side, there's no traffic lights on Kuberg Road at Plattekloof Road. So that's a sort of queue coming through from Kalani Garden side. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
Good morning, 7 minutes after 8. You're with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Critis. Air travel, how's that industry going after all of the trouble they've been through? We'll talk about that in the next little while. Other conversations to come. We'll talk about hydrogen as well. This conversation around teenage pregnancy, of course, very difficult conversation. Very, sort of a conversation that really requires us to think quite deeply about how we change things and what we change and what kind of intervention that we mount. We'll be talking about that a little bit more, I think. And yet it's suddenly becoming so important. It's such an important conversation that we need to have there. I think it really is something that we need to sort of think about and tackle correctly. You know, look at the evidence, look at policy, look at what's worked in other places, all of those things. I do think we need to look at that. We'll be continuing your conversations around that. Load shedding, of course, still a big issue this morning after that court judgment. And then politics and what happens in our politics and, you know, whether there'll be a sort of new candidate or not. And what's going to happen in today's court ruling, I think that's going to be really important. So I look forward to that as well. You're with SFM 8 after 8.
The Queens of African Football, Banyana, want to defend their WAFCON title. However, they must negotiate maximum points with their visitors, Burkina Faso. This is the second leg of the Women Africa Cup of Nations WAFCON qualifiers. West African outfit say their long trip to Southern Africa is to grab all the 3 points. All All roads lead to Morocco WAFCON 2024. South Africa tackles Burkina Faso on Monday, 4 December at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and S3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. # We love it here. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
At SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
Rex on the line from Leidenburg. Hello, Rex. You want to talk alcohol abuse?
Yes, sure. I've just spent 3 weeks in Pakistan. It's an alcohol-free society, and you just realize that people find other things to do. They're not miserable because they don't have alcohol. Okay. Secondly, Pakistan is a relatively poor country. They've got a bit of agriculture, especially in the outlying, and yet their standard of living is quite a lot higher. It's a lot higher than other countries, that have got more money. But we just don't realize how destructive alcohol it is. It's also a macho image problem, and I think they must do away with the advertising. Everything in moderation. I enjoy beer, but I enjoy it a hell of a lot more now when I'm older than I did when I was younger. There's just too much macho image involved with it. I think we could learn a lot from Muslim society.
So you reckon that cutting out alcohol, and the idea of just reducing it, I mean, that for me is the thing. Reducing the amount it might be the most important thing to do.
No, I don't ban it. Just cut out the advertising. That's it. Leave the rest.
Okay.
Just take out the macho image out of it.
Yeah. All right. No,
macho image is very destructive.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
In any form.
All right.
Okay.
Rex, thanks very much indeed. Rex, do appreciate that on the line from Leidenburg. The thing about advertising, I remember, and this has been discussed, and I think we might have had a mediated conversation about it at some point, is around what happened in Russia. What they did a few years ago in Russia is they did 3 things, if I recall, the 3 big interventions. One, Rex has already talked about, which is you cut out the advertising of alcohol. The second is you make it more expensive, and you don't just make it suddenly more expensive. You basically add 10% a year, and over a decade, you're doubling the price, right? And then the third thing you do is you reduce the closing hours, so you make it less available. So in Russia, of course, it's a 24-hour society in places like Moscow. What they did there is they just cut down the number of hours that bottle stores could be open over time. And as a result, that really reduced the amount of alcohol and increased life expectancy in Russia quite dramatically. The World Health Organization, I read it once, had a big paper about it. Very interesting to look at. Maybe something we need to look at. 11 after 8.
Beyond the Headline on SAFM.
When you joined the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro and became mayor at the Metro, these were some of the problems that you also found there. What was your experience like? What did you find?
In the last 18 or 19 months that I've been with Action SA, I've been traveling the length and breadth of this province. Everywhere, it is absolutely rampant. So some of the notorious departments are, for example, the Department of Refuse Removal. And what you have happening there is malicious sabotage of vehicles. So vehicle tires are burst, and then the municipal vehicle can't operate, so then they have to go out to tender to do the refuse removal.
Ethel Trollop is the former mayor of the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro and also now chairperson, of course, of Action SA in the Eastern Cape.
Beyond the Headline with Aldrin Sampear. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana.
It's heartbreaking.
Everybody comes on air and they want to sound nice. So many people that I know personally that have died in the hands of criminals.
Yeah.
Our minister nearly died in the hands of criminals. And now everybody is jumping up and down. The minister, is telling us now they have declared a war against the criminals. They never declared a war against the criminals. When my son was beaten blue and black.
I'm so sorry about what you guys went through. I hope that you and your family are receiving counseling.
Thanks.
All right.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday. First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
All right, well, good to hear from you this morning on 086 000 2032. And we've been talking, of course, about teenage pregnancy. We've been talking about other issues as well. I've been fascinated by the idea, and it keeps coming back, that someone will enter our politics and change everything. And I sort of feel that while people might sort of have that hope, I don't know if that would be the case. And it seems the multi-party coalition, they're looking at the multi-party charter, are looking at sort of, having someone come in. I don't know if that really will make a big difference or not, at what it will do. And I know that there have been various interviews with people around it and said, look, it's got to be the right person, all of those things. I think finding the right person is the difficult thing. Voice notes coming through this morning as well.
Good morning, Steve Ovo. It's Chris and Peter Maritzburg. Today's Constitutional Court decision, I'm waiting for it for a number of reasons. The first reason is that we hope that it's going to put a stop to this political party elitism, where political parties believe that they can predetermine the outcome of the 2024 elections.
Sorry about that. We had, I think, played that a little earlier. 14 after 8.
Big stories of the day. #SAFM Sunrise.
Talking a little bit about how people are moving around the country and the world at the moment, of course, with the festive season coming upon us. And during COVID, we had so many conversations around what was happening in the aviation industry. And, of course, the world's sort of supposedly getting back to normal, whatever that might actually be. So what's happening then with the aviation industry and the global aviation industry when it comes to returning from the pandemic? Hendrik du Preez is the Vice President for Africa at Qatar Airways. Hendrik, good morning. Thanks for your time this morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
Well, you obviously run a global airline. You go almost everywhere. Your global passenger numbers, are you seeing a proper recovery?
Yeah, Stephen, I think we've definitely seen a massive recovery this year. We've actually seen significant growth over the last 2 years. There's still some pockets where it's a bit weak, but overall there's been a massive surge. And I think globally, if you look at the numbers, they say we are about 83% of pre-COVID numbers right now, and that's globally. Yeah.
Okay, so we still aren't where we were before.
Not quite, but I think as we look at tourism recovery, there was some World Tourism Organization data was released, and they say for November or the last 3 months of this year, we're sitting at about 90% of pre-COVID. So I think there's different reasons that people are traveling, but definitely tourism is heading in the right direction, and I think by early next year, probably this year, December, we'll see a pre-COVID complete recovery.
I mean, also, there were lots of debates around whether the world has changed and whether it was the sort of end of business travel, So many people got used to living their lives on Zoom and, and all of those things and conferencing and all of that. And obviously their share prices went through the roof. And the idea would be, well, now a manager doesn't have to travel around the world to go and check on the Beijing office. Do you think that has actually been the case? I mean, are you finding that actually people do need to go to Beijing to check on the office there?
No, I definitely think so. The corporate travel has not recovered as quickly as the tourism travel has recovered. I think corporate travel is only sitting at about 70% of pre-COVID levels right now. But you definitely can't take the value of face-to-face meetings out of it. I think there's been a big shift of working from home more, but again, to a certain extent, working from home will necessitate another type of business travel, where people have to go to their offices maybe once or twice a month. Where they didn't do it before. I think in South Africa we've seen it where there was a big migration to the coast, for instance, where people moved down to the Cape and that, but still working for businesses based in Joburg. And we're seeing a very similar pattern globally. And then on the other end, you've got certain types of corporate travel, skilled labor traffic that will never go away. And people working in the mining industry, the oil and gas industries, all of those that's still in full force.
And then the different types of travel in terms of your classes. So, I mean, you have sort of economy class, premium economy, a business, and then first class. And, you have to be doing quite well in life to travel first class. But, the sort of corporate travelers, because it's in those more expensive things where airlines would make most of their money. Are you finding more people, are you seeing a different pattern in terms of business class is emptier than it used to be, economies fuller, things like that?
No, I don't think so. What we've seen actually during the pandemic was that a lot of people wanted that privacy and exclusivity or perceived safety that business class brings to it. So we saw an initial surge into the business class cabins. But at the same time, I think if people are traveling less, they might opt to travel more comfortable and more convenient. So hence, I think there's still a good split on that we've seen.
And the places that people are going to, have they changed? And obviously, this is not just around COVID, but around the sort of conflicts that we've seen. So people might have been involved in business in Sudan, they've probably stepped back from that. Might have been involved in business in Ukraine, they've stepped back from that. The situation in Gaza, of course. The places that people are going to, are you seeing changes in those patterns?
I think we've seen a lot of the old patterns return recently, in the last 6 months. If we talk it from a leisure perspective, I think any global conflicts, changes like that that's always been there, So those are normal changes that's been happening over the years. But we've seen a move back to, I would say, pre-COVID travel patterns. If you look at Southern Africa, the traditional leisure destinations where people would go to the east, go to Thailand, go to Phuket, Bali, those points. We've seen a lot of that travel coming back. I think what happened during COVID was a necessity of travel where people travel to see family and friends, and I think we're kind of out of that now. So we see the normal travel patterns returning to a big extent.
Do you think, we find that the global economy is not as good as we would like it to be, the South African economy in particular, very tough at the moment. Does that have an impact on how much business you get from Southern Africa? I presume South Africa is your main Southern African hub. Does that impact how much business you've got going from here? Very few people are going to travel for leisure right now or travel internationally for leisure.
I think, again, next year will be quite indicative of how the market has recovered in Southern Africa specifically. What we've seen during COVID and even this year, there was still a lot of pent-up travel demand, where people didn't travel for 1 or 2 years, and they might have had savings, and they call it grudge travel even to an extent, where people just needed to get out, And what we're also seeing a trend back is where families start traveling together, multi-generational families, and I think this is something that COVID has done again, where people were isolated and now that they've got the opportunity to travel together. I think the next year will be quite indicative of how it's going to go forward. But like I said, over the last year, we've seen a steady upwards trend, which has been quite positive.
And is there going to be less competition or more competition going into the future? In our domestic market, we see obviously some of the domestic carriers have sort of 1 or 2 have disappeared. Internationally, are you seeing a change with competitors?
Yes, I think so. Obviously, like I said, there's been a lot of changes in travel during COVID and even post-COVID. What we've seen, if we look at South Africa again, there's some international carriers that's got more capacity or frequencies into South Africa than they had before COVID, and even new entrants that's flying into Cape Town, for instance. So we've seen a steady rise. I think at this stage, the demand is still outstripping the capacity that is available. So, competition is not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. In Africa specifically, it's always been a challenge. It's one of the biggest underserved markets in the world. If you think we've got nearly 20% of the world population, but only 2% of the world's traveling population. So I think there's still a lot of opportunity for growth.
Hendrik de Preeb, thank you. Vice President for Africa at Qatar Airways. 21 minutes after 8.
EFC is live this Thursday. 3 incredible title fights in one night. The welterweight strap is on the line as Mark Hume takes on Peace Ngopane. And the most dominant featherweight Iga Cabeza faces the only man he has lost to in 6 years, the Pitbull, Ronaldo Exon. Plus, the finishing machine Humphrey King Cobra Malenga takes on Kaleka Kabanda for the vacant lightweight title. EFC 110, watch it on SABC Sport Channel on DTT Channel 4 from 7 p.m. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
All right, so we've been talking a lot about energy and electricity at different points of the show today, and there's now been a discovery of natural hydrogen, the gas discovered under Earth's surface, and hydrogen is one of the most, in our solar system, is one of the sort of most commonly found elements. It is, of course, a big part of the sun, but to find hydrogen gas can be very, very useful. Professor Adam Bambi is a structural geologist at the University of Pretoria. Professor Bambi, good morning and thanks for your time.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to all your listeners on SAFM. Good to be here.
How was this gas actually found? How was this deposit found in Mpumalanga?
Well, we were at the University of Pretoria. We were kind of tipped off. We were part of a big international consortium of European Union and African Union countries, and our collaborators in Europe had been working for the last 3 or 4 years on hydrogen occurrences, natural hydrogen occurrences in the rest of the world, and in almost every single case, the places where this hydrogen comes up to the surface in other parts of the world are characterized by sort of shallow depressions. In other parts of the world, they refer to them as fairy circles, which I think is very telling that nobody quite knew why these depressions were forming until they discovered that there was actually natural hydrogen coming out of them. So one of our collaborators in Portugal got in touch with us and said, in Mpumalanga, you have all of these things that you call pans. Maybe they're the same as the fairy circles in the rest of the world. Go and check for hydrogen. So off we went, and lo and behold, there's the hydrogen.
Sure. Is it there in large quantities? I mean, if you lit up a cigarette, would you be in serious trouble?
Well, the one place in the country, in the continent, where hydrogen is presently being exploited is in Mali. And the story there is that back in 1987, they were drilling for water, and they drilled a borehole for about 108 meters down. And there was a drilling contractor with a lit cigarette, and the whole thing exploded. It took them quite a few days to get the fire out. So potentially, yes, if you've got very deep boreholes that are tapping into these big reserves that are down underground, it can be spontaneously explosive with just a spark or a cigarette. In our explanation, we're only going about 1 meter down. We've got a very narrow drill bit, very shallow drill bit, and we're just effectively sniffing at the surface.
Sure. So then, do we know how much is there? And obviously, when people are looking for more electricity and more energy at the moment, and there's a lot of talk about green hydrogen, which you actually have to process. You have to use quite a lot of sort of power to get it. This would be possible, able to be exploited?
That's what we hoped. This situation in Mali that I was discussing a few moments ago, they've now linked that up to a 30 kilowatt generator, which is enough only to supply the nearest village with power. So I don't think that anything we're talking about here is going to solve the national energy crisis. This is small standalone units, maybe powering a nearby farm or a nearby community, but I don't think we're going to produce enough electricity here ever to solve all of the problems that we have in South Africa at the moment.
I understand that this hydrogen is called natural hydrogen or white hydrogen. Why is it called white hydrogen?
To be honest, I'm not very sure. There's all of these colours in inverted commas that have been assigned to hydrogen. It is, of course, all colourless gas, but there's black hydrogen, where you use the electricity for splitting the hydrogen off water using coal. There's grey hydrogen, where you use other hydrocarbons. Green hydrogen, which is the one that everybody's talking about. That's where you use renewables like solar or wind to supply the energy for the electrolysis of water to produce the hydrogen. And I'm not sure why they chose white for natural hydrogen, maybe because it's considered sort of to be pure, if you like. The other way they use, the other color that they use to describe it is gold hydrogen. That's another synonym for this naturally produced hydrogen.
Fascinating, isn't it? Professor Adam Bumby, thank you. Structural geologist at the University of Pretoria. Really appreciate the time. 27 minutes after 8.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. Banyana.
They're in action today. They've landed in South Africa over the weekend. This is now the second leg of the Women's Africa Cup Nation qualifier. They'll take on Burkina Faso, hosted at the Lucas Moripe Stadium today. Banyana were held now to a 1-0 draw by Burkina Faso in the first leg in Côte d'Ivoire on Thursday. Coach Desiree Ellis's Chargers do have an away goal advantage and will take this to today's encounter. Rugby, according to reports, Springbok players playing abroad are considering a return to South African franchises. The likes of Jason Jenkins, Trevor Nyakane and Jasper Visser have all shown an interest in playing their club rugby in South Africa. Now, the Bulls, they've made no secret of their desire to lure big players back to Loftus. Having already signed Willie Leroux this season, Jake White's team are believed to be eager to secure the return to the team of Springbok Nyakane. The Stormers are still putting their financial ducks in a row as the union emerges from administration with a new equity partner, and that is set to bolster their recruitment power. Now, the former tennis world number one, Rafa Nadal, will return at the Brisbane International warm-up event for the Australian Open in January. The 22-time Grand Slam champion has not played a competitive match since bowing out in the second round of this year's Australian Open when he was hampered by a hip flexor problem. Nadal was initially expected to miss just 8 weeks, but underwent surgery on a hip muscle in June. Here's Nadal on his return.
After 1 year outside of the tour, I think it's the right moment to be back. I have been working hard and feeling much better the last couple of weeks. So I feel ready to announce that I will be back in Brisbane the first week of the season.
On to golf action, and Joaquin Niemann defeated Ryuka Hoshino in a playoff to win the ISPS Handa Australian Open. The pair finished level on 14 under par after 72 holes, with the Chilean Niemann surging to the top of the leaderboard in Sydney after birdieing the 18th for a 5-under round of 66. Meanwhile, in the women's event, South Africa's Ashley Buhai went on to beat the favourite Minji Lee by one shot. Here's Buhai.
It was a lot of fun. Obviously, she had majority support, and I knew that she was going to come out firing today. It's what Minji does, and put that pressure. And I literally feel like I really only hit one, maybe two real bad shots the whole day. It was tough out there. I knew they had to come catch me, so I just tried to play smart golf, hit it to my areas. It was tough for us to get it close.
And finally, Scotty Scheffler finally got his hands on the Hero World Challenge title after finishing a runner-up in 2021 and 2022. Scheffler shot a final round of 68 to see him 4 shots clear of Austrian Sepp Straker in the tournament hosted by Tiger Woods. More sport for you on SFM at around 12:30. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Burnout. How would you know it if you saw it? That's next. You're with SFM leading the conversation. It's 8:30.
Thanks, Stephen. Good morning. For SAFM News, I'm Mpho Tole. Making headlines, the ANC says achieving a decisive victory in the 2024 general elections is its target. It's despite the party's Secretary-General, Fikile Mbalula, admitting earlier this year that the ANC might lose its majority if it doesn't fix the country's energy crisis. In other news, the SACP has accused the Impala Platinum Mine of failing to put in place measures that could have prevented the deaths of 12 miners at its operations in Rustenburg in the northwest. SACP General Secretary Solima Baila has called for harsher consequences for mining companies that put profits before human lives. And South Africa has become the first African country that Saudi Arabia has added to its e-visa system. Tourism Minister Patricia de Lille says this simplifies the process for South Africans seeking e-visas for travel to Saudi Arabia. I'll have these and other stories at the top of the hour.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Still very heavy coming into Joburg, approaching Heidelberg, and it's a big 3-truck crash that we had earlier this morning. I just spoke to someone on a tourist bus there saying they sat on that bus for an hour to get past that scene. That's how bad it is. So long queues basically between De Hoek Plaza, or north of De Hoek Plaza, running through towards the Weybridge just before Heidelberg. N12 and R24 routes in for the East Day busy coming into Galulis. Both of those routes jammed, particularly the N12, which is pushed back towards Craft Road. The N3, a breakdown at Marlborough Drive. It's been with us all morning. The N3 is heavy coming off Buccleuch interchange all the way down through that Limbro Park area. Durban's N2 still busy on the run through Spaghetti Junction up into the roadworks at the M13. The big queue that we had going through to Mount Edgecombe is starting to ease up. Roadworks on the M13 coming out of Pinetown at Paradise Valley, so some delays there. Over in Quebec, there's a breakdown on the N2 North just after Blue Water Bay up towards the St George's Street exit. That bus is causing quite a heavy backlog in that section of the Eastern Cape. And Cape Town, unusual to see the Marine Drive run out of Tableview so busy at this hour. Normally it will be clearing up, but still queuing from Bayside down to the first set of traffic lights at Sunset Beach, and the N7 Jake Scoville Drive queuing both ways into Fort Trekker Road in the heart of Goodwood. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
You see, Change happens, and it improves our lives. Change is good. It opens doors to new horizons and leads to a more informed tomorrow. Being in the know is no longer for the selected few. Information is for all of us to enjoy, whenever, wherever. Sunday World, putting the latest stories, sports results, exclusive video content, and celebrity news at your fingertips. To stay informed, download the Sunday World app today. Available on the App Store and Google Play. Sunday is just the start.
Banyana Banyana, African champions and top 16 team in the world are in action on Monday the 4th of December 2023 at the Lucas Moripe Stadium at 3 p.m. They are on the road to defend the trophy as they face Burkina Faso for the Women's Africa Cup of Nations 2024 qualifiers. Join us to close the year. Tickets are available at Ticket Pro at 20 Rand for adults and free for children under 12 and scholars in uniform. You can also watch the match live on S3 at 3 p.m.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
It's 26 minutes now to 9. The time for your mediated conversation this morning. So, as the end of the year comes, how are you feeling? Are you energized? Are you looking forward to the end of the year and the start of a new year and you can't wait? Or are you actually pretty much over it? Do you find that nothing excites you? Everything's a bit meh. All you do is worry, think about trying to get through the day, and actually, nothing makes you happy anymore. Nothing really makes you sad. You're just tired. Well, it may be that you're actually suffering from some form of burnout, that you may also be in danger of suffering some kind of harm. And if you consider how tough life is at the moment, you would not be alone. I think millions of people may feel like you. So then, how do we deal with burnout? How do we cope with it? And how do we avoid it? First this morning, the Professor of Psychology from Wits University, Professor Mohlahlana, is also an associate researcher at the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation. What is burnout? It will be the first question. Then you'll hear from the coach, Vumile Msweli. She's CEO of Hesed Consulting. We'll ask her about how you make sure you and everyone around you avoids burnout. And finally, a group of people who suggest that what we should be doing is working less to try and avoid burnout. Karen Lowe is the director of the organisation 4 Day Week South Africa. We start then with the Professor of Psychology at Wits University, Professor Mohlahlana. Professor Lange, good morning and thank you for your time.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to your listeners.
I suppose I should start with the definition. How would you describe or how would you define burnout?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, obviously, with how you started the conversation, it may create an impression as if Bernard, we're talking about being tired, because it's the end of the year. We're all looking forward to the festive, sort of like the season. But the two are quite different, because with burnout, we're basically talking about like a state of like exhaustion. And obviously, this exhaustion may be due to chronic stress. And obviously, stress it is when demands on you as a person normally over exceed available resources. And resources here, I don't mean financial resources only, resources in terms of time, resources in terms of things that you need to do. And I guess the ability to manage, all this, demands onto you. So obviously, if the stress is continuous, in terms of the work that you do, you get to a point where the body begins to burn, and it reaches the state of burnout. So obviously, burnout, you become mentally exhausted, you become physically exhausted, you become emotionally exhausted, and there are all kinds of symptoms associated with this exhaustion. I mean, of course, and I think the clear distinction must be made around tiredness. So obviously here, when you think of it, you struggle to concentrate. You're not thinking clearly. You become irritable, and it's quite different from you when you're feeling no strength. So I think that would be a certain summary of the definition of what is burnout.
Could burnout also include being grumpy all the time, being cross all the time, lashing out at the slightest thing?
I mean, those could be like, some of the symptoms, because obviously, if then I would talk about like, the stages that we go through, like I said, I mean, in terms of putting the hierarchy, I can say you begin being like, stressed. And obviously, when people are stressed, there'll be all kinds of like, symptoms. But I think the clear distinction is when the stress is like, continuous. And the body, obviously, biologically, the body will try and respond. It will release like, all kinds of like, symptoms and chemicals as a way of responding to the pressures that you are sort of like feeling. But like I said, if then it continues, you get to a point where your functioning slowly become dilated. You're no longer able to function like optimally. So it will not just be you simply feel crampy, you simply feel irritable. So in terms of the intensity, it is extremely, extremely high. To a point where in the long run, people begin to have mental problems as a result of that.
Right. Professor, I'm just going to ask you to move around a little bit. We're battling to hear you. Can burnout happen even if you actually, say, enjoy your job? Even if something's fun and rewarding, can the stress of it still be overwhelming?
Yeah, I think I mean, maybe here to make a distinction, it's in terms of the sources. I mean, to say, what are the sources of like burnout? Because obviously with burnout, we talk about you feeling like overwhelmed as a result of the work that you do. And you may be enjoying the work that you do, Stephen, where you know that your schedule starts very, very early in the morning. And of course, you need to sort of like, prepare, for you and I to have this like, conversation. And I suspect as part of it, you had to do like, some bit of research there and there. You don't just like, come on air. You have not done like, your homework. So obviously what it means is that you need to put extra hours. And obviously for you to put this show, you're working with a number of like people. No one can afford to drop the ball, because if one drops the ball, the whole show, will become like sort of like a mess. But of course, there are like, certain things that you have no control over, on how you want the show to sort of like, pan out. And obviously then it depends on the guys at the back, who are sending us, I guess, like SMSs to ensure that we come online on time. And then you can imagine, you're very passionate about this. Is the job that you like, and you've been doing it for years and years and years. But of course, if then, I mean, you feel unsupported, and then you get to a point where it's like on Sunday, instead of being at home, you're worried about like on Monday, how is this conversation going to unfold? And obviously you're not spending, I guess, quality time. And I guess the coach later on will talk about like things that you need to sort of like do. So obviously it has nothing with the fact that you like your job. You may be liking your job, but the work environment has come to a point where it is like quite frustrating, to a point where it affects that passion that you sort of like have.
So if someone's feeling burnout and they think they're feeling burnout, I mean, what's the best thing to do after that? And I mean, the first, people would think, well, maybe you need to take, a long rest. I think the difference sometimes is that a rest kind of doesn't do it with burnout. You may need more than a rest. I don't know. Is just rest enough?
I mean, it could be one of the ways of like trying to deal with like burnout, because I know obviously now, if maybe like as a psychologist, say if one was to then rely, let's say for an example, on the DSM like 5, to say in the DSM-5, which I guess it's a text that is being used, to diagnose like all kinds of like mental health like challenges. Of course, you don't explicitly find like burnout in the text. So, but of lately there are instruments that can be used, in assessing if whether one is having a burnout or not, and obviously you're able to make that distinction. So practically, yes, there are things that people can do, but obviously if it is not like stress and it is burnout, just taking time off, because of course many of us, we can't wait. At least now we have an extra holiday on the 15th, and then we take time off, we go off, and we come back in January. You may still not feel re-energized, because it had nothing to do with like tiredness. We're still going back to the same work environment that I guess, like I said, it is not very supportive. And of course, you personally, there are things that you can do as a way of maximizing your own sort of energy of making sure that you get enough sleep. You try and live healthily. You try and take care of self. You set boundaries, because the other issue, with the colleague who's coming, later in terms of working 4 days or working 5 days, I think there's so much that we've learned during COVID, where a lot of people started complaining that, look, the home and workplace, it was quite difficult to make a distinction. And of course, now we live in a tech world where we sleep, some of us, with our phones, and then we're not able to set those boundaries. So obviously those are things that can be sort of introduced. But of course, if the work environment does not sort of improve, you personally, you can do a lot of things, but you may still sort of get to a point where you, I guess, you burn out.
Professor, thank you. Professor Mohlahlana, Professor of Psychology at Wits and Associate Research at the Centre for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation. 16 minutes to 9. Continue your mediator conversation around burnout. Vumile Msweli is a coach. She's the CEO of Hesed Consulting. Vumile, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning, Stephen. Good morning to your listeners.
When you coach people, are there ways to avoid burnout? Are there things that people can do to make sure it doesn't happen to them?
Yes, definitely in the career coaching space, I certainly believe that prevention is better than cure. So one of the things that, based off Helen Nicholson's research in her book Mindfulness, is to actually start at the beginning of the year scheduling what we call micro breaks and macro breaks. So micro breaks are the short lefts, the staycations, I'm going to switch off my phone and be able to sleep in. And also the macro to say, how do you take advantage of perhaps the public holidays to then actually take time out to be away from your normal environment in order for you to recharge. It's also making sure that you are looking, of course, after your own mental health, making sure you're, before even getting to the place of crashing, you are making time to spend with your therapist or to unpack with a coach. So that way, throughout the year, you're looking forward to breaks before you actually break down.
I presume also it's important for a manager to know that some of their workers may be close to burnout. You've got to look for certain signs and make sure that they're able to sort of be managed to avoid that.
Definitely. So there are times we know, specifically in the accounting fraternity, for example, where it's tax year end, people are chasing deadlines towards the end of March, etc., where there's a lot of pressure. That's when you, as a manager and as a leader, you need to know what the cycles and the seasons are of pressure in your own environment and be aware of what is happening within the mental health of the people that you actually lead. It's also very, very important for us to also note what is happening in the personal capacity, not in a granular detail perspective, but to understand what potentially could be making the person not have as much energy, which if we demand more of them will actually lead to burnout. So as leaders, it's really being very much aware of the people that we lead, the environment that we are leading in order to avoid our people reaching burnout.
Does it help to have other interests? And by which I mean it can be a sport, it can be a hobby of some kind, it can be being part of a different association. And even though that may actually require more work and energy, it means you're doing something that's not work. Is that important?
I think that is very, very critical because in essence, our ability to recharge is by not mentally engaging in what we normally engage in. It's one of the reasons our bodies need sleep, so we're not awake, so we're able to recharge. The same for mental focus as well. So if you do have hobbies, sports, personal engagements, communities outside of your work, then what you do find is it actually grows your capacity to deal with work. So it's very, very important that we pick up hobbies, we pick up engagements that are not just work related. And I know some of us are going to say, oh, but for me, I play golf. If the only time you play golf is purely for work to close deals, then it might not be as necessarily as relaxing as it could be if you did it purely for pleasure and at times with just friends for the sake of having fun.
It's something you need to do for yourself. It's got to be for no one else.
It really does need to be for no one else. And of course, what these hobbies are, all impact us differently. Whatever it is that you do to recharge, that after you've done, you feel like you've taken a holiday, that for me is what you need to start inserting into your life. And try doing it in microdoses, doing it on a weekly basis, doing it on a monthly basis, making sure you do insert those times for you to recharge purely for yourself. A lot of things we're also finding is that specifically with people working from home, like as the professor mentioned earlier, people don't have a differentiator. So work and home are now the same association. So they actually don't have a place that is a sanctuary for recharging. So making sure you're finding that space, whether it's going for a walk, picking up running, something that takes you out of the normal work associated environment to allow you to recharge.
Is it actually, I mean, you made the point of having something to look forward to. I find that can really matter. I know people who, for example, if they're going for a long cycle on a Friday, will spend hours planning it, even though they aren't doing anything. I mean, they're at work, they're being productive. What they're actually doing in their head, they're already on their sort of Friday break.
It really does make a difference. And a lot of us often think that with the recharge, it's just the destination. It's actually the journey as well. The process of mentally preparing to disengage, to recharge, to reflect, and really be by ourselves with people we love that really give us energy in itself is an act of disengaging from our normal mental methodologies, which we use and during working hours. So the process of planning for it almost is just as important as the process of actually being there. So it's important that we do look forward to it. So if it feels like, oh my goodness, it's too much admin, I'm not even enjoying the process, then find something else where you can enjoy the process as well as the destination.
Do you think people realize how serious burnout can be? I mean, you could lose a very productive employee just through burnout.
I think both employers and employees at times don't quite realize. Employees tend to underestimate the mental impact and how it can actually also become physiological when burnout really, really does hit you at a very high level. And I think employers tend to think, oh no, it's just a little bit of pressure. Everyone will a weekend away or a little bit of a nap and everyone will be fine. Not realizing that psychologically the impact is there long after the deadline has actually met, and it can result in people having to choose their mental health and their emotional well-being, which can result in high staff turnover. We do notice a lot in high-pressure environments that don't allow for enough recharge, where there are long hours and and sort of a muddled boundaries between work and play, where people are working on weekends as well. That eventually, when burnout does happen, people tend to not be able to get that talent back, having to then, of course, expend more energy and time and resources and try